You have a multitude.
That's frightening.
Oh,
I know I need to pick up my new glasses, but I do know this is not double vision.
yeah, so
Oh, look, and if I look up here, I have 3 of you.
so welcome back, commissioners, and back to you, Chair Harrington.
Are we online? Yes, we are online. Okay, we have a full agenda this afternoon. Our first topic is a follow-on briefing on program cost recovery proposals in LUT and HHS. Commissioners, as you can see on the second page of the topic worksheet, this is an update. Since our January 3rd meeting, staff has continued to do some further engagement and has an updated proposal. So welcome to our folks.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you. I'm Stephen Roberts, Land Use and Transportation Director, and I'm joined at the table here by Aaron Wardell, our Planning and Development Services Manager. And we'll be followed up very quickly by the Health and Human Services team. Director Mira Samantle's here with her team. And again, as you said, this is an update to a presentation that we provided to you in January. And we've both done some additional work and coming back to provide an update. So I think with that, do we have the slides?
Here's the clicker, the all important clicker.
hello.
Somebody has control and it's
Yeah.
not me. There you go.
All right. Ooh, okay. Yep. So specifically, we're also looking to confirm board direction to advance fee increases that are related to some recommendations that we both presented last time as well. Both again, around achieving cost recovery for some county services that we provide. The policy questions really back to the support. Do you support us moving forward in both LUT and HHS with proposed increases to help achieve cost recovery? So Erin's actually going to walk us through the LUT information. So I'll turn it over to her. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So this slide covers the information that we brought to you in the previous 2 months as we've done the previous briefings on this topic. As a refresher for people who are just tuning in now, we've been facing challenges in our building services and current planning work groups, which are intended to be full cost recovery, fee supported sections. Over time, our costs have not kept up with, or our revenues have not kept up with our costs, particularly as staff costs have increased. We also have seen decreased development activity and different types of development that generate less revenue for our teams. The impact of that has been overloaded staff, short-staffed, long turnaround times on our processes, and depleted reserves. We have taken incremental actions to address these challenges. We did small fee increases for the fiscal years 2020, 2021, and 22-23, but those did not make up for our increasing costs. We also have reduced service levels as we needed to with reduced staffing levels. We have implemented process improvements as much as possible to create additional efficiencies and are looking to do even more of that moving forward. We commissioned an independent consultant to do a study of our fees and our service levels and provide us with recommendations, which we shared with the board in December. Our staff presented the initial fee increase proposal at your January 3rd work session. At that time, we were recommending a draft proposal of a 40% fee increase this fiscal year, plus a technology fee, which would have been 5 to 7%. We then would have recommended a 10% fee increase in 24-25 and indexed adjustments in future years. Since that work session, we have been working on preparing our more detailed budget. Once we took into account all of the most up-to-date budget information and looked at pieces like the expected cost of living increase, as well as overhead contributions to county functions, we realized that our best path forward at this time is the 50% increase at once in this next fiscal year. We then would recommend implementing the index adjustment in the next fiscal year and then in perpetuity going forward based on our program cost recovery. We would also look at implementing the technology fee at that time. So that gives us another year to refine what that technology fee would be, what it would pay for, whether it would be a flat fee or a percentage of permit. It just gives us more time to really work on what that component of it would be. With implementing the 50% fee increase for fiscal year 23-24, we will be able to continue to operate our building services and current planning functions. We would be very strategic about staff vacancies that we'd be able to fill with that. And neither of those programs would be projected to break even within the first 2 years, meaning we would consider to still draw down our reserves, but we think that the numbers will work for us to be able to make those budgets balance over the next 2 years. We are assuming a pretty pessimistic development forecast over those next 2 years. We think that was our safest approach to developing this budget. If we're wrong and development activity is a little bit more robust, then we will probably achieve breaking even sooner, and that would be a good thing. But we wanted to be cautious in our forecast. So this is our updated staff proposal at this time.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Based upon, I think, a piece of feedback that Commissioner Willie shared during board communication earlier that I summarize as at least one member of the development community expressing that they wanted to know what additional service they were going to get for increased fees. What I understand from this presentation is we're just trying to get back to a responsive level of service. So, the crass statement of you get what you pay for right now, what they're continuing to experience is a slower rate. And delays. Staff's had to work really hard on the backlog. So does this proposal at least enable the department to keep up?
It does. It gets us to what I would call our normal service delivery timeline. So we would expect that with this fee increase, we will be able to maintain sufficient staff so that we don't end up in the same situation as we had with the building permit backlog, where we were looking at 8 weeks on turnaround time for permits. Currently, we're experiencing a shortage in our building inspection team. That's delayed people being able to get inspections within a week. I actually think we're moving beyond that backlog as well. And so we should have that situation resolved fairly soon with some hiring that we have going on right now. So we'd be looking at maintaining that going into the future. We wouldn't be running with so many vacancies. We'd actually be able to fill out our staff teams.
Okay, so if I might, so I like to understand things in terms of what a summary service level is. So on the inspection side that inspections would be performed within a week of request, and with permit applications, I'm still grasping with trying to understand what the proposed or the targeted turnaround time is.
We're actually working on documenting all of those
Oh.
pieces. So we would like to develop our expected service levels and have that be available
Okay.
to you and to the
Terrific.
public as well. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just clarify, our normal turnaround time for inspections is typically next business day. That's our ideal target. And that's where we want to get back to. As Aaron said, we're currently short-staffed. And
Got
so
it.
we're trying to do some hiring and get ourselves back at or close to that timeline as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Does your projection include the governor's projection for 36,000?
No, we're not counting on that.
We can't. It's only an idea.
I just wondered if that affected what, okay,
It actually is a question we received. And actually, if we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about that. Actually,
I
this is,
understand, but
we have a future slide that talks a little bit
Okay,
about it.
that's fine.
If there's external funding assumed as well. So this slide shows our bar chart and line charts of what this 50% fee increase would do for our revenues compared with our expenditures. You're also seeing on there the bars, which are our ending fund balance. So the building services fund balance was more robust than current plannings. And so you can see, even though we continue to draw it down a little bit into the future before it starts ticking up again, it was healthy enough that we won't go negative in that account. Current planning gets pretty low, quite frankly. And so we may need to do a loan from another fund for a year while we wait for that cost recovery to kick in. So this is something that we'll be continuing to evaluate and thinking about staffing levels that we need. If we're correct about the development activity, that means we need one staffing level. If we're wrong, we may need some additional staff, but ideally that will then pay for itself because we'll have fees that actually pay for the staffing that we need.
And I would just note, I think there's a lot of caveats and assumptions that we have to make in order to do these models. So as Aaron was saying, we're trying to be reasonable and relatively conservative in terms of development activity and the revenue that generates. It's possible that we may actually have better outcomes, but it's also possible we could have worse outcomes, right? So we're just trying to do reasonable planning here and
Yep.
make reasonable assumptions.
Thank you for trying.
I have a quick question, Sharon. Am I reading it correctly, Aaron, here? You're projecting the revenue and expenditure to balance it out 2025, so 24, 25?
It looks like 25, 26, actually, almost in 24, 25, but really we're thinking it's going to take us a few years before our revenue and expenditures actually match up. It's going to take us a while to achieve that
With the indexing you prefaced earlier?
with the 50% fee increase. Yes, it still takes us a while to recover.
And the additional index,
And
And the additional.
right.
indexing in subsequent
Right.
years. Yeah.
So what's the number you used for indexing?
I think at this point, we assumed about 5% per year.
Okay, let's keep going.
So we have been doing stakeholder, go ahead. Yes.
5% each year, so 50%, 55, 60. Then is that?
No, 50% is our,
Oh,
catch-up.
index it,
That's our
okay.
big adjustment to get us to the level that we need to be at. And
And
then
then you're.
5% each.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we have been doing stakeholder outreach, as we told the board when we were here on January 3rd. So we've met with the cities of Banks, Gaston, and North Plains with their staff. Those are the 3 rural cities that we provide building services to because they don't have their own building officials and therefore cannot conduct their own building activities. All of them expressed interest in keeping their relationship with Washington County to continue to provide those services to them. We also held a developer listening session on January 19th, where we shared the information we shared with the board on January 3rd and heard their feedback. Some of their main concerns are summarized here. Of course, the first was they're expecting declining development activity as well, and this is a pretty significant fee increase. So there were some concerns about the mismatch between that, but we expressed we need to be able to pay for our staff, and we don't want to end up in these backlog situations going forward. They did have some ideas for process improvements that could speed up our timelines and help our staff as well as help the development community. So we'll be continuing to work with the developers to implement some of the proposed changes that will work for both of us. There were a lot of questions around the technology fee, what that could pay for and how it would be assessed. As we're now recommending, we're giving ourselves more time to figure out what that could be, and we'll be recommending it next year when we start talking to you about budget. They also had questions about how our staffing levels now compare to our historic staffing levels, particularly at times we had different development activity. We did prepare that data and we shared it back with them. Generally, staffing levels are pretty commensurate with development activity over time. We reduce staff when we have less development activity. We increase staff when we have more development activity. And then finally, there were questions about, will there be opportunities for external funding sources? For example, if the state identifies a funding source to help pay for building departments, we did not assume that in preparing these budgets. It would be great if that happened and we would adjust going forward if that did, but we certainly were not counting on it. So for our next steps, we are looking to refine this presentation, and we're looking to then prepare our fee schedule so that we can move forward with preparing our budgets. We'll be refining our technology fee proposal before we come back to you next year. We'll also be developing our draft policies for how we would determine the annual fee index amount, because it would be based on trying to achieve that program cost recovery each year. Continue to do ongoing stakeholder outreach. For example, we'll talk to our developers again at our development forum, which is coming up next in April, and continue, of course, our internal process improvements, because we have some really good opportunities there to take a look at how we do our work and how we can be more efficient in it. And that is it for LUT.
Should we checkpoint on just LUT first and then switch to HHS? Okay, so we have an updated proposal here from our staff. Board members, are you comfortable, or do you have any questions first about supporting the proposed fee increase for fiscal year 23-24 for the LUT current planning and building services program?
Comments, and I have concerns. But somebody else-
Go.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Comments. One, I commend you for the work that you're doing. I think it's important. It's always nice to see that people are actually looking at cost of service. Government has a monopoly, and as a board of a monopoly, we need to understand that we're doing things appropriately and conducting ourselves appropriately. So I commend you for all that. What's missing? And the chair kind of went down a lane that I was going to go down. I don't like the 50%. It may be necessary to do that without understanding completely what the deliverables are. I wouldn't personally, the rest of the board would not vote for this unless there's deliverables. What does it mean? What am I getting as a developer for this increased fee? And that's exactly what she was asking. And I heard some generalizations, but I think it's something that needs to be spelled out. The expectations need to be at least known. Secondly, it would be good to understand your assumptions. I'm not trying to get down in the weeds too much as an accountant, but enough to understand that you heard Willie say, well, what percentage, or maybe it was Commissioner Pike, one of the two, what percentage increase are you indexing? I don't know what your assumptions are. You can develop any sort of graphs by faulty assumptions. So it'd be nice to understand what those are. And the third thing, it would be nice to understand if you've looked at alternative models and you say, well, what's an alternative model? It goes back a few years, but we actually contracted at the county for a lot of inspections, a lot of building services with outside providers. Heaven knows we do that in a number of things with free enterprise system. Do we only do things internally, or is there any economy? And if you said, we've looked at it, there is no economy, nobody has it, that's fine. I just like to check it off the box so somebody can say, well, you're a lot more expensive than if you took and you used people from the outside. So the three quick things, again, I'm being redundant. One, it would be nice to understand what those deliverables are. Days of inspection, improvements to the, to the system, what's happening here. So deliverables, what really are your assumptions? What do these look like? So everybody's very clear. And is there a business model that's different than what you're proposing? Have you looked at that? I don't want you to think I'm too critical, because again, being the first up to bat is never fun. But that's the distinction you've got. You're looking at all this stuff, and I commend you for looking
Okay,
at it.
I think we got it. I think Commissioner Rogers is going to need some offline time. What you came to us with previously was an improved fee for service model, because the model that you're currently operating under is insufficient. So we know it's broken and we need to make improvements. So you've done work to be responsive within our timeframe of this proposed budget. And so we'll just have to leave it there for the moment in terms of your more detailed information ask. Other questions on this particular model?
Yeah, and it's just to follow up on what both of you just said, in our conversations with the HBA, they understand, but there is an expectation.
Mhm.
So as long as we communicate that clearly and perform, we'll be okay.
Any other questions?
When are you going to propose these, just so we know the dates? Immediately?
So the next steps would really be rolling in increases into our proposed fee schedule and budget assumptions. And budgets are actually due this week, which are going to be predicated on increasing the fee revenues. And I think we're happy to share with you certainly the assumptions. And as Aaron said, we're working on cataloging service level expectations around that. So we're happy to share that information.
We have no time to talk, so let's go accordingly. But
Well, I think what your question was, when's the effective date of the new fee increase, provided we approve this? Is that July 1?
That would be
It would be
July
July.
1st. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question that is, I'm in support of this reluctantly, like all of us, right? But what I'd like to see is like a touch point along the way after July 1st, maybe quarterly for a while, just to see where we are in relationship to service levels and the response to this increase. So I think we'd
So
be,
Ms. Angie, in an upcoming quarterly management
Mhm.
report, could you give us that
Yep.
update?
and I'd like that update to include feedback from
Mhm.
people that you're working with as well.
Great.
It's very reasonable.
I think we might get that.
I know we'll get it. I just want to see them get it.
I don't know that I want to enforce that they need to do a developer
that-
workshop every single quarter versus share with us.
That wasn't my ask. It's more to share with us any feedback that they get from their clientele.
I was picking up on the word touch. That's,
I clarifying the question Commissioner Treese asked around or the developer engagement piece. That's the ongoing stakeholder outreach.
Yes.
You're part of that. So this doesn't sunset today. Your next step.
We will continue to engage with our development community, and based on the board's direction today, we'll be developing some communication pieces to go out to that community to let them know these fee increases are happening July 1st, get ready for them. We'll also be expecting an influx in development activity in May and June as people come in trying to get ahead of it. So we are looking at staffing models so that we can accommodate somewhat of a surge and not fall behind like we did last summer.
And I will just add, really, it's maintaining ongoing stakeholder outreach. We've been engaged with our stakeholders throughout this process. They've been expressing concerns about the timeline and have been very active in working with the team on trying to problem solve within our current financial constraints of the revenue. So this is really maintaining that ongoing stakeholder relationship moving forward.
And in terms of the budget piece of all of this being built into the budget and the assumptions that Stephen mentioned, how will that be teased out from the budget so that we pay attention to this issue, that if we do hear some significant concern, then we come back and have more conversation about this? I'm not debating that 50% is needed. I think your previous meetings convinced me the work you did, like where we need to center the best interest of Washington County. That is in the debate. How we do and how we roll out is the question for me. So I'm wondering, I don't want the budget piece to be lost and that we neglect certain details, especially I would speak for myself. So how will that be teased out from the budget? Because the budget we're gonna get is a huge binder. And I think this has a significant impact for certain group. But then again, it has ties to the governor, what we're trying to do with our supportive housing. So we need to build. So
Let me try to.
Ms. Angie,
Yep.
I think what we need to do is put together a resolution and order that we adopt with regard to budget direction for these building services and community planning fees, so that it's clear that we're trying to make improvements to the system that we already know doesn't support the industry sufficiently, move towards a more robust system, and ensure that you have the appropriate direction from the board to construct your proposed budget.
Due to timing, we will bring that R&O back to the next board meeting.
Does that make the process more complex that we're asking you to do the R&O?
No, in essence, it sets that policy direction in place that we would just be kind of reiterated in the proposed budget process and proposed annual fee structure.
Okay.
Happy to do that. And I think the quarterly touch points, I know you'll be getting quarterly budget updates. And so this probably would be one of the funds that'll be highlighted in that budget update. So you'll get a sort of a snapshot of how things are going throughout the year. And then, of course, we're happy to provide some sort of a supplemental quarterly written update just in terms of service levels, things like that. I think we can do those things.
And part of my request was also to make sure that we don't get into this position into the future as well.
That is the
Yeah,
bottom line
that's-
objective
yeah,
of all of
yes.
this, is to try to get us out of that situation. Yes, thank you.
And that's a part of documenting all the work as well, and documenting our expected service levels going forward. If we document them, we'll know when we're not meeting them right away. And so that's a big part of this work.
Onward to part two.
Thank you all.
And just to hone your estimation skills in the future, it takes us a minimum of a half hour to get through any department's fee structure.
All right, well, good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. My name is Mira Samantel. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. With me, I have Marie Bowman Davis, who's our Public Health Division Manager. Also in the audience is John Kawaguchi, who is our Environmental Health Programs Supervisor. So he's available for subject matter questions if they arise. I know we're a little short on time, but I will do my best to move us along. We are here today, as you know, as a follow-up to the work session we did on January 23rd. Our proposal, our staff proposal remains the same, which is 100% cost recovery within environmental health. But we are following up on some items that you wanted clarification and had questions on, in addition to feedback from our Public Health Advisory Council. So just some high-level high-level trend setting for what we're talking about today for anyone who in the audience wasn't here on January 3rd, sorry. And as a reminder to all of you. So the environmental health program within public health currently fulfills specific statutory responsibilities with a combination of fee revenues and general fund subsidy. Your board of county commissioners serves as the local public health authority governing body. And as such, you were able to make schedules of fees. You can adopt fee schedules for public health services that are reasonably calculated and not to exceed the cost of services performed. So each year our fees have increased just a little bit, about 3 to 5% on average, but they haven't been able to keep up with actual costs within environmental health. Our existing methodology that we've been using for fee setting predates our current staff. So we've been challenged with understanding how fees are produced, utilizing our available data, and determining how to recover program costs. So because of that, in early 2022, HHS contracted with Marina and Company, it's a local CPA firm, to revise our fee setting methodologies and tools so we could really plan out our fiscal year revenue forecasting so we can move towards full cost recovery. So again, what we're looking at, what we're bringing to you today is a recommendation to budget for 100% cost recovery. This would do an estimated general fund subsidy savings of approximately $260,000. So on this slide, you're going to see a chart. This is an updated chart. Thank you all for your patience as we had some errors on it last time, so we've corrected those errors. So this chart shows budgeted revenues and budgeted expenditures going back about 6 fiscal years. It also shows the gap between revenues and expenditures and therefore the general fund subsidy amount. As I said before, we've had incremental increases averaging 3 to 5%, but they haven't kept pace with our expenses, resulting in that ongoing general fund subsidy. There were questions last time about fluctuations in our general fund subsidy. Why was that? So we wanted to just provide a little more information for you. So main reasons for the fluctuations. First, as I mentioned before, we didn't have a good tool. We didn't have a good methodology that really captured our expenses, and that is being fixed in this tool that we have from Marina and Company. In addition, there were issues in the local economy that impact our ability to forecast. COVID-19 is a perfect example. There were things that we could not predict in terms of restaurants closing, the amount of time it would take for them to reopen, how long it would take for them to catch up on business. So we just really didn't have a good way to predict those revenues and our associated expenditures. That's why you see this fluctuation. So just for the audience, because I know it's small, so the blue line up top is the expenditures and the orange line is the revenues, and that gap in between them is reflected below in the gray boxes. Let me see, just to make sure I covered all these. So again, this is why we engaged Marina and Company, and our new tool that we have is really also going to be able to assist us in kind of forecasting in a way that we're going to be able to capture personnel changes. So for instance, I think it actually might be on the next slide. I was talking about workload demands. Oh, it's on the next slide. I'll wait, I'm gonna pause there. Any questions on this? Because I know last time there were concerns about the chart and we have fixed that.
What percentage increase are you talking?
Good question. Okay, so financial impacts, that was like a perfect segue, Commissioner Rogers. So 100% cost recovery, what we're looking at is an average of anywhere from 5% to 11%. We have 3 different categories. We have restaurants, pools and tourists, and other food. So it's going to be different depending on what category. As a reminder, we have 200 different fees in environmental health. The ones you see on this chart up here, this is just a small sample. So we have a sample of a restaurant over 150 seats, a class 4 food cart, a hotel, et cetera. So these are just a sampling of fees. We have 200 different fees. So that's why you see the big variation. And this is where, sorry, I was going to speak to the equity. Our fee calculations resemble a targeted universalism approach to fee recovery or to cost recovery. So we're not just doing a flat 2% increase or 5% increase. We're going to really base it on the costs of each of those services so that we're having that universalism approach to cost recovery. So again, it's going to vary depending on which fee it is and which category it is. We did add, this wasn't here last time on January 3rd, the temporary restaurant booth. Commissioner Fye, I think you had brought this up. What about somebody who sets up for a fair or, for a farmer's market? So we reflect what that cost would be. So it would be, it would go from $251. This is an annual fee, by the way, for all the categories, $251 to $254. So a $3 increase for that particular category. Questions on this slide?
Yeah, and I think previously I had issues with, it says estimated 11%, but some of them were considerably higher than 11%. So I felt like we were being a little disingenuous in that. And I don't know how you communicate that. I know it's an average, but if I were to get a bill that said it was a 25%, I'd come back and say, hey, you told me it was 11.
Yeah, Roger.
So I don't know how we communicate that better, but that's probably my concern. I think specifically you're looking at pools and spas that are much more than your 11%. So anyway, I didn't do my math on those things, but just looking at it, I think that's my concern with this.
Okay. And we do have, I think the information in the full board packet from January 3rd provides a little more detailed information, but definitely in the actual fee schedule, it would outline each and every one of those 200 different fees and what their increases would be. We'd be happy to follow up with you later, Commissioner.
I just don't know how you communicate it to because the previous information did give you much more detail. And that's where I went in and started looking at, okay, you're talking about large restaurants versus small restaurants and food carts and pools. And we heard we have 200 swimming pools or something in Washington County, which all of us were really surprised at. But so yeah, it's a huge, it's a huge gamut
variation
there. And so, anyway, I don't know how you do that, but that was still my concern.
I think I'm going to hold off until the end just because I think we might be able to clarify how we communicate that. I'll ask John, but I'll move us along and that way we can wrap up with any other questions that you may have. Because this is really our last slide. So the other items that we had promised to provide responses and feedback to you on was feedback from our Public Health Advisory Council. They met on January 10th, so just a week after the work session where we were at with you. The majority of the Public Health Advisory Council did support a full cost recovery fee philosophy. The request during the meeting was to actually split out the 3 different categories: restaurants, pools and tourists, and other food for purposes of voting. So when we got the votes, when we got the responses, 70% of the votes supported 100% cost recovery for restaurants, 80% supported 100% cost recovery for pools and tourists, and about 50% supported 100% cost recovery for other food. And that's that's childcare in schools. So I understand, I think Commissioner Fye, you were at that meeting. There was a little more concern in the other food category, specifically because childcare in schools impacts children and students. I also wanted to note how many of the Public Health Advisory Council voted in that meeting. There are 15 members of the Public Health Advisory Council. 11 members responded to the vote, 1 abstained. So we had 10 out of 15 reflected in those votes. Any questions or Commissioner Fye, anything else you
For
want?
the record, I'm not a voting member, so this is only members who voted, and I think what you summarize is what I heard.
Excellent. And then also we talked about, just briefly, we wanted to mention that we will continue to minimize program costs through cost containment efforts. So that's the annual use of our budgeting tools. This new tool from Marina and Company will help us greatly in that. And then reevaluating our cost inputs. So really looking at our personal cost, materials and supplies as we go forward. So for example, we can look at the length of time needed for an inspection, and we can review that and include that as an input into our tool each year when we do fee setting. So again, just to wrap up, our recommendation from staff remains 100% cost recovery for next fiscal year. This would be an estimated general fund subsidy, again, subsidy savings of $260,000. So those are all of our follow-up items from the HHS perspective. Marie, do you want to share anything about how we would communicate out the fee changes, or do we need John to come up to speak to that?
I think it would be helpful for John.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, John Kawaguchi, Program Supervisor of Environmental Health Program. So previous years, as stated, it has been roughly 3 to 5%. So we have not necessarily made any announcement prior years. As we implement this new process or system that was created by Marina and Company, we envision reaching out and providing more information, especially for those that will be increased more than 3 to 5%. So we want to definitely get out ahead of it and inform the different owners, operators with a new system that we do have in place. We do have the ability to do mass emails to each of the operators and owners. So, but it'll be more than just an email or call. You know, we have opportunities to, of course, do outreach when we're out in the field. So per IGA, intergovernmental agreement, we're required to inspect majority of these facilities twice a year. So as we're out there performing our regulatory requirements, we will be able to do one-on-one or firsthand kind of information, providing that kind of any type of increase or changes that might occur. So it'll be more than just like receiving an email. I think we're going to do at least multiple ways. We also have a program communication and education specialist that we'll utilize. He is bilingual, bicultural, so we'll be able to at least reach out to the Spanish-speaking community. And we also have, of course, other contractual linguistics that we'll have access to if and when needed.
Yes, and as a reminder, the fee would increase if adopted would start July 1st. However, fees are renewed annually in January. And so there is a sufficient amount of time to answer questions and work with the community regarding the new fee philosophy.
What does that mean, fees are renewed annually January 1st?
So, excuse me. So of course we're operate fiscally. So the fee schedule will be implemented July 1st.
Yep.
For the program with Oregon Health Authority, all licenses expire at the end of the calendar year. So it's not a rolling 12-month.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have plenty of time to plan.
Yes. Any questions?
Go ahead, Roy.
I just have a couple of them. One, I fully support the cost recovery model you're talking about. I think that's really important. Couple of things and questions. I'm not sure who at Marina, whether it was Tanya or Rob or whoever developed this model. Is that something we can use year after year? Is it, and it's ours, so we can use it, or do we have to have them come back and refresh it?
Yes, we have 3 separate spreadsheets that have multiple tabs. Each spreadsheet is for each of the types of fees. It is a tool that can, we can update, our analysts can update as our personnel cost exchange change on a fiscal year basis. So this is a tool that we own and that we're able to use and replicate and document.
Excellent answer. Second one is and you partially answered this by, it's on a calendar year renewal, fiscal, but what impact does the remainder of this year have on these calculations? Because you aren't going to do those until July 1. Are we going to have additional subsidy to you that we didn't know about simply because we're in a little different cycle than these fees?
So, good question. So every year we go through this process.
Right.
So last year, for 2023, right, they're required to pay by the end of 2022, so December 31st, right? So majority of them already made their payments for this calendar year. And throughout the year, though, there are facilities or businesses that open up mid-year. The ones that go out of business, unfortunately, and there's a change of ownership. So any business that opens after July or June 30th or has a change of ownership after June 30th, they charge the new fees that will be approved by the board for this next fiscal year, 23-24.
John, just so I completely understand, don't want to be too myopic on this, but if we adopted this soon, are you not going to implement it till July?
Correct.
So if somebody opens in March, will they pay the old fee?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Well, I think more what I thought you were leaning towards was because it's a half year
We still have that.
fiscal year. Are we going to still, when we go to budget 23-24, are we going to need to subsidize from the general fund for that 6-month gap?
No, because we majority of our payments, we receive it for within like 3 months, December, January, and February. So throughout the whole year, we have to explain this to finance a lot because like, hey, where's your revenue? Where's your revenue? We collect the majority in December, January, and February. So that covers our entire fiscal year.
Okay. That was my question.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you look on July 1st and look at what revenue we have, it's not going to look really good.
So in any of the modeling, did you do, well, let's just say restaurants will make 13% across the board, not an average, 13%, and pools, 15%. And I mean, did you use, again, I'm still hammering on the just flat line raise.
Right.
Did you consider those in your modeling?
So I have the workbook in front of me, if that's helpful. In the way the tool is developed is there are inputs for demand planning, and those inputs are guided predominantly by Oregon administrative rules regarding standards for our performance. And so in the demand planning, for example, we have annual hours worked per full-time equivalent, and then the percent of that work for each individual inspection. And then there are additional inputs regarding vehicle expenses or supplies. And then that is aligned with fee-specific inputs. So the number of facilities estimated for inspection, the facility turnover rate estimated, the number of annual inspections that are mandated. And so all of those types of calculations come into a spreadsheet where we have per category. So for example, in restaurants, we have 66 rows for calculation, and 58 of them are filled. And so with that, we're able to see the increase based on the inputs. So it's not that we looked at a fee and increased based on the fee. It's the inputs and the statutory obligations that helped us guide the fee calculation.
So and I think we're short on time. So I would say.
And I apologize. I didn't mean to get that far into the detail. I do remember reading the spreadsheets that you provided with the previous thing. So yeah, I apologize for that. So. got too much in the weeds. Sorry. You should have rang me up and said, we're moving on.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you for your work and thanks for coming back with some of the more information, and I'm in support of this.
Me too.
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know you already spoke to LUT about theirs, so I think we are wrapped up.
Yep, I think we're good. So next steps will include this fee as well as the LUT and that RNO and bring it back to the board for at this next at the board's next meeting for an action, just so we're clear on what direction there is in this budget, proposed budget.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. All righty, I would suggest that we move on to our next topic, American Rescue Plan, ARPA investment planning, and then after that, take a short break. Welcome, Dorian.
Thank you.
And we know that there is a big team behind you that has been working on this information with you. So thank you for leading it.
Absolutely. Thank you. For the record, my name is Dorian Russell, she, her, or they, them. I am the ARPA program manager for Washington County. I am overjoyed to be joined by a deep bench of subject matter experts behind me, notably Dr. Marie Bowman Davis, your appointed public health administrator, who's here to answer any questions you have about the state of the pandemic or COVID-19 health mandates. Courtney Duke Dreisen, your deputy county counsel, for any questions you have on vetting the eligibility for capital projects. And Laurel Brown, our resident facilities expert, who can answer any technical questions you have about capital projects. So we look forward to answering any questions you have after this brief presentation. I want to underscore that we're not looking for a decision from the board today. We're presenting a suite of options, investment area options, and we're looking to gather your feedback so that we can come back in March with a refined proposal and refresh to your ARPA framework. Oh, I believe that this is an outdated version of the PowerPoint, so I'm going to provide a little bit more detail on today's purpose. First, we're looking to consider.
Just 1 second. Did your presentation get included, or did an updated packet go out with a modified
Yes.
presentation? Okay.
Yes, but I'm happy to verbally share, and it does reflect all of the information that was in the memo included in the packet as well.
I'm just wondering if you would prefer that we just catch up with that and streamline.
Sure. Kevin, am I able to work with you to send you that PowerPoint, or do you have the updated version?
So I would suggest we take a quick 5-minute, maybe bio break and then
5
we can
minutes, folks.
get the new, most current presentation. update.
We'll
Thank you.
see you back here
Doesn't look like this.
at 5 minutes before 2.
Show me the second.
So 7 minutes. Thank you.
So here's the rest of it.
Yes, you have the correct.
So Dorian,
Yes.
just in the spare time, I'd ask you.
Yeah, just give it-
Sorry, don't need to pull you away from Mary, but just make sure we have the accurate one.
Yep.
Okay.
And I agree, but I want you to read it.
I use.
And I did forward it.
Oh, I see, not what this morning packet itself.
She didn't send it to me.
Yes,
though.
that's the right one. What's an agenda is correct.
Well, then
Okay.
she has a wrong email
So we
address.
said.
I'm checking.
That's an Jenny showing is updated, but
Yes.
I didn't get to share with IT.
And she's
Do you want
probably.
the updated?
off
Yeah, if you
base.
just want to send it to me, chat, I can
Well, that's.
share it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Kevin.
9:09.
And she's probably looking at the old.
I'm forwarding this to you right now. So you can-
Okay, do we have an updated presentation? And is, just for the sake of people in our viewing audience, has the packet online been updated too?
Yes, the packet
Gosh,
online
yes.
is updated.
Wonderful.
The packet online was correct. It
Okay.
was just the screen that we were showing. So the
Terrific.
materials you have is correct. The materials that the public were able to view are
We're
correct.
all on the same page.
Yes,
This slide
absolutely.
is much better than.
thank you. There's a bit more detail.
It's
for
worth
what
the 5 minutes.
Exactly what we're asking you for. So once again, we're looking for your input and direction today. We're not looking for a decision. We're going to come back to you in March with a refined proposal based on the feedback we get today. The specific questions that we have for you include considering a recommendation to elevate resilience as a guiding theme in our ARPA framework refresh and continue to use the core values of equity, collaboration, and good governance that your board previously approved. We're also asking you to consider reallocation and directing staff to work with your steering committee to provide a recommendation for tranche 1 funds that have not yet been committed. And finally, we have a suite of allocation options we're presenting to you today. We want your guidance on those options so that we can come back with a more detailed proposal for next time. Now, a really brief reflection on the outcomes from the first half of funds. So throughout the pandemic, we've been really laser focused. ARPA investments have been essential in driving community-wide progress through response and recovery phases and now toward a resilience phase. Shown here is a small sample of achievements. A full review is available in your board packet for every one of your ARPA programs. Just some quick highlights. As a county, we've been competing above our weight class when it comes to our performance. Little too sticky there. We've gotten national level recognition in the form of awards and inclusion to invitation only best practice circles. And this has really affirmed the board's approach when it comes to your ARPA framework. This recognition means that we've been thoughtful in the pacing, design, tracking, and engagement across ARPA programs, especially in centering equity. Shown here and included in the packet in greater detail is the current snapshot of your Tranche 1 spending. Regarding reallocation opportunities, staff and your ARPA board leads are working to bring forward a board-wide recommendation on reallocating your uncommitted funds. Altogether, we have the potential to consider $7 million or more in funds that are not currently tied to contracts. A common question that I get is, are we spending this money too fast? Are we spending this money too slow? Well, ultimately, the pace of spending is tied to board direction in terms of your investment strategy. We are benchmarking ourselves against other best practice jurisdictions nationally, and we find that we're in the middle of the pack when it comes to spend rate, and we are especially comparable to jurisdictions that have incorporated efforts in co-creation with community and projects design and implementation.
Can I ask a clarifying question on this model?
Absolutely.
Why is there a difference between unobligated remainder and uncommitted remainder?
That's an excellent question. So unobligated, we mean that in the formal Treasury definition of an obligation signed on the dotted line in a contract, versus uncommitted, things that are at various stages of RFP or contract negotiations, where that's already been committed to a project, but is not meeting the Treasury's definition of having already been obligated in the last quarter of contracts.
I'm with
That's
you.
dense.
I think that last.
Let's come back in March.
I think it's important that you manage to the Treasury, but for a layperson vocabulary, a non-US Treasury, unobligated means we, the Board of Commissioners, are not on the hook for continuing to use those funds under a model that may not work for us now in current time. So I don't know which of those columns to wrap my head around.
This is a much simpler way to visualize that information, really to answer the question of how much funding is the board really have to work with in terms of what's remaining from Tranche 1 and that Tranche 2 allocation. Your Tranche 2 allocation, completely untouched, no board decisions yet, is at $58.4 million. And what I'm saying is there's approximately $7 million that isn't tied up at any stage of contracting that staff and your steering committee will review in detail and bring a proposal for reallocations next time that we meet. So really what to remember is you have $58.4 million to work with. We may be able to reallocate up to $7 million of that remainder from the first tranche of funding. It's a much simpler way than that previous slide of detail.
I have a quick question.
Well, and somebody's phones.
Oh.
So is that 7 million in the previous slide in the lower right-hand box?
Yes, that's
okay.
So why isn't that 7 million
Because they rounded up.
then?
Round it up, and we're going to take a look at how much is actually spent compared to what was contracted for, if there's a discrepancy.
I have a question, Dorian. You use the word reallocate. You're saying that in Tranche 1, the 7 million was already allocated.
Correct.
It just didn't meet the Treasury requirements. So they become unobligated now, or?
That is simply at this point in time, all of the different projects that your board has allocated funding toward, that is what hasn't yet been contracted or spent. Though you could choose as a board to leave those allocations in those projects if you want them to move forward. But you might determine that you have other priorities, that your priorities may be different than where you were as a board in 2021. And so what my team is going to do with Commissioners Harrington and Willie is bring a recommendation forward for these are the projects you might want to reconsider based on what priorities we hear from the board today. Okay. You could choose to leave them at their current allocations. That's an option.
Or increase them.
Yes, absolutely.
We just reserved the right to get smarter over the course of time.
Exactly. But that's a more detailed conversation for next time after we get a better sense of your priorities. In terms of thinking about ARPA phases where we've been, we have two different tranches of funding, but we're characterizing the journey that we've been on with ARPA into three different phases: response, recovery, and resilience. How we're recommending to characterize this in terms of refreshing the ARPA framework: response refers to all of the actions that we took directly targeting the COVID-19 emergency. Recovery being those holistic actions targeting the negative economic and health impacts of COVID-19, many of the projects that you approved for Tranche 1. And where we're proposing that we go is this resilience category and really thinking about transformational actions targeting our whole system's ability to withstand future emergencies. And that's what we're recommending as a guiding theme for the entirety of Tranche 2. I want to note that there's no distinct line in the sand between each of the phases here. When we were doing response work, we were also doing recovery work. And while we're doing recovery work, we're also advancing resilience. This is a broad continuum. And to illustrate this, I have put each of the different investment areas from your Tranche 1 framework on this slide to show that we've been doing a little bit of each of these things, but we want to continue moving toward the right side of that continuum. This slide will be familiar in terms of ARPA timelines. This is a reminder that we have to fully obligate or contract all of our funding by the end of 2024, and we have until the end of 2026 to spend all of the funds.
Is that 24 fiscal or calendar?
Calendar.
What, December 31st, 2024 to have everything obligated?
Correct. And for both tranches, they're not treated differently.
I knew that, but I wanted you to enforce it.
Yes. So in terms of the proposed resilience theme, this also stems from community engagement efforts to date. At a summary level, community partners have expressed a strong desire to center social determinants of well-being, defined as this economic, social, and community factors that impact long-term quality of life outcomes. These are themes that emerged from a broad spectrum of factors. You'll see nonprofit community building, mental health access, small business support, and more. And now revisiting and refreshing the ARPA framework. So here are your previously adopted ARPA framework values. As stated, we recommend elevating that resilience value to be the entire guiding umbrella theme for work moving forward and to maintain equity, collaboration, and good governance as our ARPA values. In terms of implementing resilience as a guiding theme, how we would put this into action would be selecting transformational projects that use one-time funds to strengthen our ability to withstand future emergencies and focus on outcomes-based approaches grounded in social determinants of well-being for each of the projects. In terms of operationalizing equity, we're suggesting developing universal goals for outcomes while employing targeted strategies. This builds on the previous presentation that also mentioned targeted universalism. And you might recall this concept from previous engagement with John Powell, a national equity policy expert. For example, how would this look in action? If your board chose to invest, say, in small business resiliency for Tranche 2, you might suggest that a goal is to ensure that all businesses in the county have access to training on how to implement a business plan. That's a universal goal because it applies to all businesses, but the best strategies to reach each business might differ across different types of groups. For example, Mina's taco truck might need a very different targeted strategy than Mustafa's tax service company needs for each business to thrive. So what this means in practice is we're recommending goals that apply to everyone, but we're not recommending one size fits all strategies to achieve equitable outcomes. I'm going to go ahead and skip this video for today, but I'll be sure that you have access to the link in the packet. In terms of collaboration, here is a quick review of the structures and the strategies that we've used for development of the ARPA framework to begin with. We recommend continuing to use these structures moving forward. In terms of implementing the good governance value, really here, we're leaning into transparency and connecting dollars to impact. We've heard board feedback and we have invested in glossy annual reports, quarterly reports, improved social media, and we're working on a public data dashboard as well for transparency. So now to the investment options. Again, we're not looking for a decision today, but we're looking to really gather your priorities in each of these areas. So for the tranche one reallocation approach, first we recommend reviewing programs with uncommitted funds and bringing a recommendation back to your board in March. In March, we anticipate having those reallocation recommendations and really bringing the feedback that you provide us today into a revised framework. We would anticipate board taking action and adopting the framework and investment area allocations in April. And finally, understanding that we need to obligate by New Year's Eve 2024, we recommend revisiting allocations every 6 months to make sure that we're spending on time and that we leave no dollars on the table.
Can I just clarify?
Yes.
Because you used 2 different D words on that slide.
Oh.
It says April board-wide decision, yet in the paragraph below, it says board direction April. And I'm just wondering, I just want to make sure I know which it is, sorry.
Yes, so we would like to get board direction in April, but we would anticipate any reallocations and the 6-month rotation of revisiting to start on July 1. But we would recommend taking board action in a meeting to adopt the framework and your allocation categories in April.
So I think that's
Is it-
like Blue
would it-
should be direction, not decision.
So there were,
Okay.
I'm wondering though, if I hear 2 steps in April.
I
That- yeah,
I heard that.
direction and
then
then
decision.
subsequent action. Okay.
Great.
Direction and
I'll
action.
make sure that's revised.
Direction and decision. I get that.
Okay.
I'm caught up. Thanks.
This slide is really the main course of our discussion here. We have a series of must-have investments and we have a series of options for your board to consider. In terms of the must-haves, we have COVID-19 public health mandate compliance. That $6 million is at the minimum level. This would be a reduced service level, reduced CBO involvement compared to our previous activities. The board has the option to allocate the $6 million or more to public health if desired. Conversely, it is completely possible that the amount needed for minimum compliance might shift. It may reduce over time, creating additional opportunity for a potential reallocation of funding. In terms of effective ARPA management, this includes meeting our requirements, continuing to have public transparency in what we're doing with our funding. After the must-haves, your board has about $47 million of tranche 2 for the options on this chart, in addition to a forthcoming recommendation on reallocation that could be up to $7 million.
Could I stop you and just ask a question
Yes.
here? So the total amount of money that we're talking about here is the 58 plus the 7.
Correct.
Okay, so I was confused there. For a moment.
That's correct. Haven't touched any of that 58.4 of tranche 2.
Right.
And we'll come back to you.
But you're combining the reallocated 7 million.
Correct.
And after you're done presenting this slide, before you move to the next one, I need to ask my board colleagues for a little help. But I'm interested in hearing any questions. Was there anything more you wanted to say on this slide?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
keep going.
At least for the options. You
Yeah.
know, those are the must-haves, right? But in terms of that, you know, after the must-haves, you have about $47 million to play with. One option is community grounded projects that would include a suite of what community has prioritized as their resilience themes for the board to consider for one-time grant funding. For proposal review, you might consider prioritizing collaboration among large and small organizations and underscoring that resilience theme, selecting projects that are best able to leverage funding for other non-county funding sources in the future. While organizations might collaborate with county departments for proposals, I want to underscore that this proposed category wouldn't supplant county operations as a result of anticipated budget cuts. That $1 million there is really a placeholder. Your board could consider any amount. As for facilities projects, referring to the critical needs that you've reviewed in work session previously, those 24/7, 365 county facilities, we took a look, our county council took a look and specifically looked at those facilities projects that have air quality improvements. This would be to deliver core county services related to public safety and justice. County council's review of the treasury guidance, which requires that all ARPA projects be reasonable and proportional directly to a pandemic caused impact. They've interpreted about $34 million of HVAC could meet that definition. And then finally,
So these are what this bottom row of numbers are guideline, they started as guidelines. And then internally, we've said this is what we think is tolerable in these different
correct. So you have about $48 million of critical facilities needs.
Right.
However, county council's review, what is reasonable and proportional to the pandemic, we're suggesting at maximum $34 million for those HVAC projects.
As enumerated on page 2 of the memo.
I just wanted to call that.
Yeah.
Right. And then the general government option would include an investment in the county's core service delivery. This would offer us flexibility as a tool to stabilize our operations through the current financial condition. Local governments have been subject to similar pressures as our community has been, higher interest rates, inflation, et cetera. And ARPA recipients have the option to pursue revenue replacement as a business strategy as we're impacted by the same challenges of community.
Excuse me.
These are flexible dollars that would be general funding equal to the amount of revenue that we lost during the pandemic. So we followed the treasury calculation to look at how much revenue that we lost. That's $11.7 million. You could allocate that to a range of county services. You could allocate that to facilities needs, for example. And then finally, strategic planning, again, building organizational resilience and our ability to withstand future emergencies. Another option is to fund the consultant team for strategic planning with ARPA funds. And I'll pause there before moving on because, Chair, I think you had a couple of questions.
Yep. Hopefully the easy one first. Could you remind me again, even though you probably just said it, I was distracted by math. Could you remind me again what the strategic planning is about?
Yes, so this would be directly in line with guidance that your board has previously provided in selecting a consultant to design the strategic planning process.
Oh,
And I would
This
also
would be for the countywide strategic
Yeah.
Yes.
process.
Thank you.
Yes.
So
Wasn't
using
confused.
ARPA as the funding source.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, board, I need help. I don't have enough distance between me and the COVID years. So I'm a little concerned about Oregon trauma again. We have heard that the president is ending the health emergency in the United States in May. But I think our public health team is still on the hook for meeting Oregon public health standards, but I'm not hearing from the state for counties what that requires. And I'm not hearing our fellow counties who've received ARPA direct disbursements allocating anything towards mandated public health. And worse, here's the worst part. There were multiple times during 21 and 22 that were ARPA years where our county peers in other counties expected us to be more successful than even we were biting off as goals to make up for the lack of progress in their counties. And so when I look at this must-haves, I am not in any way resistant of our staff's efforts. Okay, and they're best estimating. What I'm concerned about is my lack of understanding of how the state is going to hold us accountable. I think I'm still a little fatigued by that. Do you know something, or is there something for me to understand that this thick head is not getting yet?
Can I ask a question first? So are you concerned that we are not allocating enough in the must-haves?
I'm not even that far along because I just don't know what the state is expecting us to do. And I'm I've developed a negative attitude about unfunded mandates.
So I think you're
That maybe OHA is going to decide in 8 months it wants us to do X, Y, Z, which.
And in shorthand, I think what I'm hearing you say is, number one, we know we're not going to be getting any more federal funds as of May, but we don't know what the expectations are going to be on ourselves set by the state. So without.
But all of our peers in Oregon, as far as I know, we're the only ones still doing work to program Tranche 2. It's been obligated or allocated by all of our peers. And I'm wondering, how come I'm not taking those La Tida happy pills?
They're not available.
I'm not. I don't usually, I'm not one to operate out of fear.
I think this is operating with caution that we've experienced because of what we've experienced. So I don't think it's fear. I think it's being prudent.
Darn.
Sorry.
So if it's helpful, if it's helpful, the team has done significant work in understanding what are our mandated requirements today.
Oh.
And that is what's been used to inform this framework. That has taken significant time to really understand what are we mandated to do. I want to commend our public health team for thoughtfully moving us from high pandemic in partnership with our community partners to what you see on your screen. That would not have happened without the leadership and partnership of our public health team. We feel confident in this number that's presented to you today, and we know that things still may continue to change. So that 6-month look could be an opportunity for us to say, whoa, the mandates have completely changed, and there may be an opportunity to reallocate even what you see in the 6 million to something else. There could be. Do we always play a risk? I'll just say with public health in general.
No more than anybody else.
Right. So I don't want to say that we have a crystal ball, This is the best professional judgment based on the team, and they put a lot of work into getting to this point.
So hearing the discussion, I'm reminded that Dorian has reminded me it's things like that outbreak and other outreach for managing that. But I think what I'm really coming to is, have you, public health experts, had meetings with OHA so that they are reflecting back that your good planning work sounds reasonable? I'm sort of wondering if Washington County needs to write them a letter saying, hey, this is what we're planning for, but if you want to hit us with a different kitchen sink, we'll probably need to regroup. We've had to turn on a dime too many times. What do you think?
Dr. Bowman Davis.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Marie Bowman Davis. I'm the Public Health Division Manager and the appointed local public health administrator. I would like to say that as local public health administrator, I'm supporting your board and the county as the local public health authority with their statutory responsibilities under Oregon Administrative Rule, which does include case investigation and outbreak and epidemic responses.
Yeah.
The guidance from the state comes from CDC because COVID-19 is a reportable disease. When the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention decides that COVID-19 is no longer a reportable disease, at least at the level it is now for the general population, then the state can change their requirements and the investigative guidelines that we follow and how we respond to case investigation and outbreak investigation and response.
So ending a health emergency is different than changing whether or not something's a reportable disease.
That's correct.
Yep. And we're doing what all county public health.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial, I think, to the members of the public. Just as a reminder, Washington County is the second largest county in the state of Oregon and the most diverse. The Portland metro area, the Tri-County area, has over half of the state population and more than 2/3 of the BIPOC community. And therefore, we have experienced more disparities than other areas of the state.
So it's the CDC
Correct.
that determines our state of well-being, so to speak. But the federal government has stepped out ahead or in a different realm and said, we're not going to be funding anymore. And actually those two decisions are independent of one another. So I think that's what makes your head spin a bit, because you would think that they might be closer in alignment.
Yes, that is an accurate summary. And I think another example is, for example, tuberculosis. We have a significant amount of responsibilities regarding active and latent tuberculosis. We follow the guidelines of the CDC, the state, and our investigative guidelines. And there is a lack of federal funding to support tuberculosis nationally.
So at least they're following a pattern. Silly us for not expecting this.
Thank you. It was a really helpful conversation for me. It really was, especially how some of the conversations have gone around our AOC tables over the last 2 months. And our entire public health burdens, and that includes behavioral health for Multnomah County and Washington County. Yeah, so keep up the good work.
Well, and thank you to the
for
board
your patience.
for your support.
Commissioner Rogers and then Commissioner Willie.
You made a comment that I want to maybe drill down a little bit on. Up front, I can tell you my prejudice on funds is to do capital improvement works for Washington County. 50 years from now, I think people will judge on whether we have facilities that are in good shape, not necessarily that we spend it on other things. And so I appreciate our public health response. I think it's been good. I understand it. I understand the dilemma you have between two states and federal, but you made a comment about 34 million, and I certainly encourage you. I don't know if you got a slide beyond this you can talk to, but the ones you sent us, that you need to do a little bit of work with consultants to make certain we can spend it all in that regard. You had them in various colored tiers. But you made a statement on 11 million. You said we had 11 million and we could spend that on capital improvement as well. Would that be in addition to the 34?
Yes, that would be in addition to the 34.
I mean, we've got a lot of needs, so we could spend 34 plus 11, 45 million.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
And then we would still have 3.77 million according to the memo to
Right.
find for the full 48.
Right.
So that, just to confirm, is that 11.7 because of what it would allow? Or is that the 11.35 million in the memo?
11.7 is the amount of eligible revenue replacement that you could put into general fund for government services.
They just both happen to be 11.
11 million, yeah.
Catherine.
Right.
Thank
Your
you.
question.
Could I ask a question back on ARPA expenditures and obligations?
Sure.
So I just want to make sure I understand, and this goes back to your question about unobligated remainder and uncommitted remainder. The way I'm looking at that is the unobligated remainder is basically frozen.
Yes, until we get further board direction.
Right, okay, that's frozen. Then the liquid piece is the uncommitted remainder, which is what we've been talking about is the 7 million, correct?
We're not going to spend any of that until we get board direction.
Right, I
would also
understand that,
consider
but
to
when
you
we're
guys.
talking about this charge, the 7 million is in
Yes.
this charge.
Yes,
Okay, so there is a potential for there to be more money out of the unobligated remainder as well.
that is correct.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
But I don't want to overpromise.
I understand. But I didn't, it's frozen now, but it'll thaw and find its home.
You have something you want to say?
Well, no, did we ever get to yours?
Sorry.
Now Pam jumps in front of me all the time, so it's okay.
But she does it very
I know
gracefully.
she's very, and has very good questions too. So going back again to this schedule. I really don't like the terms, as the chair pointed out, in those columns, because to me, unobligated remainder means it's not obligated and it's left over. And
You
then
have
we
to be a
move to an uncommitted.
card-carrying US
Yeah,
treasurer.
that's right. That's right. And you're talking to plebeians here, so, okay, we don't get this stuff. Okay, so anyway, just with that being said, in the unobligated remainder column, we've got $5.2 million plus $4.9 million, so roughly 10 million and change in those two columns under protecting public health. Okay,
Yes,
you want me to answer?
please
ask
ask the question.
Okay. The question is, we come back over to slide 22, where we talk about new options. And we were just having the conversation about must-haves. And what I was interpreting that conversation was, is that enough? Well, so wouldn't you take the 11 here and the 10 here and say, actually, we've got 21 million.
I'm going to answer your question and clarify. This was provided in the board packet, but I should have made clearer in the slides here is that $6 million assumes carry forward for the public health category.
I don't think.
And that's why there's the 7.
I'm just not.
Okay, let me think about that. I want you to say that again. That 6 million assumes the carryover. So basically.
For the
you're getting that
unobligated.
6 out of here.
So your question about what's in that uncontracted category, essentially,
The frozen one?
we would need to keep the allocation that you made in the tranche 1 framework to public health for this to be as low as $6 million.
And it's 12 is what you.
Oh, okay, okay. We have to have done all the work to have that, and if we don't, then that 6 million has to go up.
Right, if you looked at the,
Which is why she was just counting on that
Got it.
rightmost
it.
column.
and I see now
close to
that's
7 million. Nope, I'm sticking
Oh,
to
I
the
think
7
I
million.
understand now. The 6 and the 5 is the 11 that comes off of the first schedule. And that's how you get to 7. Although we get-
11.
You guys got monopoly money.
No, no. This is what.
It's getting out of control.
11.7 is what Treasury would allow for general government use out of the 58 million.
It's not out of the 58, it's out of the 116,
Well,
but we only dealing
yes.
with 58.
Out of our ARPA distribution.
Mhm.
May I make a suggestion without offending you? Both Jerry and I sat the CPA exam many, many years ago, and one of the big things we did had to have very good techniques on how to show presentations of information. And I think it would be helpful if you could take what is there that you haven't spent, showing what the carryover is from tranche 1 to tranche 2, and then how you're allocated. The spreadsheet is really hard to follow, and I think that's why everybody's asking. What's the question?
understood.
Respectfully, yeah.
No, that's great. I'll take a look at that.
I think you're doing a phenomenal job of trying to track the US Treasury vocabulary and my layperson needs.
My problem is my
commend
lack
you.
of knowledge. Thank you.
I also want to underscore that part of the reason why we're suggesting a clean break and refreshing the framework is that when your board made the decision to allocate funds, we didn't have final rule yet. We received several iterations of updated guidance after you adopted the framework. So that's some of the angst of the retrofitting that's happening here.
Well, and I continue to stand by all the great work that staff is doing with community partners. There isn't any money that is being wasted. It's all being put into really powerful action in the community. So
And speaking of that, like, how does that reflect on this slide?
In terms of community priorities. So in terms of community priorities, we've been gathering pandemic recovery and resilience thematic areas from community. And we would anticipate that if your board chooses to invest in the community grounded resilience projects category, that we would anchor that to the feedback that we've received from community as part of that review process.
but I don't know what that means in terms of a timeline, right? So, you know, I've read the various quarterly reports and I've seen the emails about the different work group meetings. But if I think about the approach and the nice arch timeline, oh, okay, I'll go there.
In a summary version of the ARCH timeline that you're referring to, really today wanting to get a sense of what of those options are your priority areas so that we can bring back proportions within each of those. Also wanting to reaffirm, did we get resilience right? Do we still have the same values that we had the last time we made allocations? I'd propose another work session in a couple of weeks from now, in March, with a reallocation proposal and a revised overall framework. So how much do you want to put in approximately to facilities? How much do we want to put in approximately to community resilience projects, et cetera? You know, what are the priority areas that you want to see as investment categories? You tell us the investment categories that you want to see. I can come back with a refined proposal rather than just a suite of options, so that in March you can work together to work toward a decision rather than just a suite of options.
So when I looked at the prior table, I assumed that all the items under blue and beige with the exception of what's in gray or purplish over on the right, would add up within the 58, but I didn't do the math to confirm. And so I'm just hoping that we can take the 7 million and increase the community grounded economic resilience programs and get more out in the community for a stronger community, knowing that I don't have to make that decision today, but that's what I like about the overall framework that you have here, knowing that you're going to be coming back to us in March, giving us more of that community feedback, since you had that schedule of January, February, maybe March meeting with community.
Right.
Can you define for me when you said the meeting with community, what does that mean?
Those crew meetings,
It's crew, and will it also be acre? Is that, or no? It's just crew,
no,
isn't it?
crew is focused on
Only on
ARPA.
ARPA. I
Yeah.
understand.
What's crew again?
CREW is the COVID-19 Racial Equity Work Group. It was originally developed during the CARES Act period to help us design and implement equitable pandemic health strategies. It's a relatively informal group. It's not application based, so very different than ACRE. It's really a work group where about 100 community-based organizations from across the entire county provide input. They're not a decision-making body, but we gather information on lived experiences throughout the community so that we can bring you information to make an informed choice on how you want to spend the funding.
So really a lot of ground level work about how putting those dollars into action has been working, clarifying what's it been like. And I just say this off of what I'm hearing.
You're
not 'cause
correct.
I've read anything or not, it's not because of any kind of presentations.
So part of the reason I asked the question before is it's slide 18, I believe. And it's the collaboration aligning values to actions.
Mm-hmm.
And on that slide, you mentioned crew, acre, and small business network. That's why I was asking
Yes.
who you were going to be meeting with.
Yes, and we have presented ARPA information, including crew takeaways at ACRE, but that is a different body. The work group that I'm
This one.
referring to, oh shoot, did I?
May have trimmed it out.
Keep going. Keep going. One more.
There we go. Yeah, so in terms of structures, yes, that code.
That's why I was asking the question about the communication piece. When I saw it here. I was asking.
We have interacted with ACRE as
we were there.
you know, but primarily in understanding community experiences. We've been
Go to
gathering information from crew. I would be happy to come back to ACRE if you would like, but my understanding is that's a much more formal body than a different role and scope.
And I was just trying to align this piece with what I was hearing.
Yes. And for clarification, the Small Business Support Network is a brand new group. It is similar to CREW, but it is community organizations that explicitly focus on economic development for small businesses. Many CREW members have joined the Small Business Support Network. It's just more focused in terms of discipline.
Really depends upon what kind of timeline we want to be making
Exactly.
decisions.
My comments would be, I think I'm hearing the chair, very similar comments to what I'd make. I would love to see the 34 million program to facilities. I'd love to see the 11 program to facilities. Because I think that this county can keep going on for another few centuries. And so I think we need to have good facilities. I would love to have you have and I'm not being critical, just maybe something that is more lay in terms of carryover funds from tranche 1, tranche 2, so we kind of see how it flows. And you're doing a good job. Beyond that, I think the rest is fine. But that's mine. But
I'd like to have information on what community grounded economic resilience projects look like.
Sure. So one option that we could consider in terms of how to implement that would be to have a public request for proposals, provide guidelines on how we want those. Actually, I think I have a slide for this. So in terms of community grounded resilience projects, we would anticipate having proposals include goals that are grounded in those social determinants, grounded in the feedback that we've received from crew, include an equity assessment, have a work plan, explain how an investment would produce a benefit beyond just the ARPA period. There's multiple ways that we could go about doing this in terms of if the feedback that I gleaned today is that you want to move forward and seeing what a process could look like for a community RFP, I'd be happy to bring more details and how we would evaluate that. Previous discussion in steering committee included a potential option to have a subcommittee of your board work with our community partners to score and determine a recommended package of projects for the full board to consider. But there's multiple different models that we could take on that front.
And that's different than what we did in tranche one, focusing primarily on workforce development.
It is different, and it also would give more weight and power to the feedback that we've gleaned from community. So rather than when we were in that response mode with the county saying, here are the ways that we know we need to respond, we're going to design how to do it with community. This would be community saying, these are the things that would make us more resilient. It's more community defined than county defined in terms of delivery. We could, however, as an alternative option to having a community grounded approach, we could have departments define projects.
So all
Instead.
options are on the table. What I'm starting to get a little uncomfortable is that I know you're living and breathing this program 5 days a week, many weeks and months. So all this community feedback, grounded in community, I feel I'm afraid I'm detached from it. And so that's where we could be interested as a board in having some sort of community grounding grant program, but it's probably going to take a couple of touch points for us to understand what that feedback is, and then put together enough of a framework so that we're like, oh, okay, we've got appropriate goals and targets, and use the board and staff expertise to go put together that wonderful program in ways that I can hand wave describe here today, but I can't identify with.
Absolutely. I would be very happy to come back with a more detailed proposal. What would help me today would be to understand relative priority, relative scope.
Yeah.
You know, how big of a community grounded grant program are we talking about? You know, designing a $20 million program is different than designing a $1 million program. And I think to Commissioner Rogers' points earlier, in you know, his recommendation is spending the full 34 eligible plus the 11.7. Does that reflect the sentiment of the entire board? Is that a proportion of facilities investment that you're comfortable with?
So before you go any further, I'm comfortable with sorry, I'm stepping in. I'm playing my commission member card. I'm comfortable with this up to 34 million because you've given us a whole memo about what's eligible. But on the general government, I'm not comfortable in saying that can only be used for facilities, right? I am comfortable in saying, Ms. Angie, we understand that we have $48 million of immediate building needs, and we understand that you have a minimum of a $25 million gap in constructing your proposed budget. So here's the 11, here's the 34 to count on for the facilities projects out of ARPA. Here's 11.7. You decide out of your problem solving which of those buckets you use with that 11.7. I mean, it's only 2 months, 3 months max away, right? Between now and the end of April. So,
If I could jump in, Chair.
yes, please.
This was a very informative presentation, Dorian. Great job and your team. And also kudos to Courtney for finding a way to weave into the facilities into here and finding ways to make it eligible or ability to be to participate in this conversation. I would have preferred, honestly, and I don't know, I think I've made the assumptions reading into the materials that I was gonna somehow come out of it, some way of options. Like, I think hearing what Marie said and the chair, the trauma involved around COVID and you know, and everyone, not just the community, but everyone, the systems that deal with the people and the people itself. So I would have preferred options of these numbers to say option one, minimum, bare minimum, the facilities, how much is the smallest amount that we are comfortable or we're willing to live with, and then option two, option three. I would say 34 million seems way too high for my comfort level to support for facilities, but I need to do more deep of homework and have more conversations with you. Obviously, it's just a reaction of the materials. But I do agree we need to solve our facility problems. And I think that we need to use all the tools in our toolbox to solve that problem. But I'm not sure, you know, so that I don't know what the next steps, but I would have preferred options to say this, like, I think one of the calculations the chair made was, let's put that 11 million or to somewhere, you know, so I that kind of options to say, you know, how do we narrow down and how do we come to consensus on these? But so I'm not lost, I would say.
Can I
So
just
you won't get a
let me
direction.
jump in there. I think some of that's already been done though, Nafisa, by Greg's schedule that he showed us a few weeks ago, where it said we can bond X, we can scrape money from here and scrape money from there, and whatever the case is. But the fact of the matter is, if you use 34 million, you're still 14 million short, and you got to find that someplace. So you're going to borrow that money, which puts the debt responsibility on next year and the next 10 years? Or are you going to, if you use less than 34 million, then you're going to borrow more money? I mean, it's just like your house mortgage, you know, you can buy X, but so I think that information has been provided to you by Greg in that schedule, at least.
May I say something about the Greg? I think Greg, what the two options was to not bond or to take the full amount of ARPA or to take 24 million is how I understood. So
Well, at that point.
that
we
is
didn't know
more
we
than
couldn't
20,
actually take the
34.
full amount to do it unless we.
So that's how I was
combine those two
reconciling what Greg presented to this, that it seemed way higher than the two options that was honed in on that.
No. They worked detail and put it in the memo that's in our packet.
4 options, but I think in the presentation here at the work session, 2 options were honed in on. So I'm focused on Like the two options that were honed in is my understanding, the subject matter experts' suggestions. So I get what you're saying, Commissioner Willie. But the 34, from my recollection, the two options that was presented seemed more than that. But I'm not saying facility needs to not be invested from ARPA.
Well, I guess what
just
I'm
think
saying is, you're saying you wouldn't commit $34 million to the repairs, and I'm saying, then how much money do you want to borrow? And how much of that responsibility are you going to push into the next 10 years of general fund demand, which reduces the ability to fund departments? Okay, so all you're doing is taking a portion of this and pushing it out into the future versus
Rather difficult budget year.
yeah, for other, which are going to be probably equally as difficult. So I can understand the 11.7 million. Okay, I'm more than willing to kick that over to Tanya and say, this is your baby. You tell us what you think would be the best use of that 11.7. But anything less than 34 million, we're going to have to borrow from someplace, and that means we got debt payments, and we don't have the money to pay debt payments. Kind of like we're buying a car, but we can't afford the payments. So I'm sorry, Tanya, I jumped in front of you.
No,
us what you think.
I want to kind of leave it up to board discussion because this is frankly your board's time to deliberate and kind of give staff direction. Maybe piecing together what staff heard when we provided the facilities options. Number one, the board had asked for what are options that we could fund our 48 million of critical facilities. This is a non-discuss. We must move forward with those repairs. There is no good option that we presented to the board. There's high risk in some of the options because we are counting on revenues that we don't know they may not even exist in the future. During that conversation, I believe it was Commissioner Rogers that asked for additional clarification around what is ARPA eligible, to understand more what could we fund with ARPA in relation to what I understood is the board's recognition of any debt means we will have to face additional cuts in the general fund in the coming years, which will impact services. Our general fund is not at a point that I can kind of skim off what's called in budget sometimes the fat, so that it's not safe. There will be further reductions. So really the policy question in front of the board is, how do you want to use ARPA in relationship to this one-time Treasury federal government dollars, one time, in relationship at the same time, we're looking to, the board will be needing to adopt a balanced budget and understanding this year isn't in a vacuum. We are going to have additional fiscal challenges moving forward. When we talk about facilities, our facilities team is currently undergoing a facilities condition index. I'm confident, just in my conversations with Ms. Brown, our facilities director, is that we are going to have really additional emergency needs that will come forward. We may have some more time to fix them because those buildings are not housing people. At the same time, what's included in these options is knowing that our community is continuing to recover from the pandemic and looking towards resilience. So that is where you do see the community grounded economic resilience project. So there is an opportunity to have that balanced approach here. I will say, as your county administrator and your budget officer, I want to underscore there are no easy decisions going into this budget process this year. And so the interrelationship with these options and our budget is significant, and the decisions that the board makes may have additional kind of service pressures and decisions we may need to make in the future.
So Commissioner Willie, if I could put you on the spot, I think what I've heard from you is that you're willing for a next discussion to include the option of the ARPA eligible up to 34 million for the facilities, for you having the model include the 11.7 million for at least to the CAO, like I was getting at, whether it's general government facilities, or have her look at the dual problems that we acknowledge we have. So Commissioner Treese, I don't know, and to be clear, what I'm also saying is, I think I'm hearing multiples comfortable with going the next step with these numbers. Mindful that the 7.1 could be utilized.
I'm comfortable with that. And I'd just also like to remind us all that the work that we do on the jail, that's not just for the county and unincorporated county. That's all, that's everybody, that's municipalities. We all depend on that. So I'm just saying that it's bigger than a building that we house our employees in.
Yep. Yeah, it's just not a.
And just for clarification, let's keep in mind that the 7 million
Yep.
of the reallocation is not included in those numbers
Correct.
across the white. So
Correct.
we still have 7 million to
Yep. Blue.
play with, if
Yep.
you want to call it that.
I'm
Or
comfortable
allocate.
to answer your question.
Yeah. I know this conversation has helped me a lot. And I appreciate the work that's gone into all the estimates and the number crunching. The part that I think we and our staff are acutely aware of are those full county-wide government needs, as opposed to being necessarily community informed through our co-creation, collaboration, and partnerships. And that's where I think all of us are grateful, though we might use different words, for having the opportunity for continued conversations, hearing what the crew and the small business work groups have, other engagement, but with that power, that opportunity of that 7 million as well to put into action. I mean, I go back to, what was it, the CARES Act days, where we had folks coming to us saying, well, we have a nonprofit and we want you to give us money to build a new building or increase our programs. And we've gotten a lot more guidance from U.S. Treasury about how those dollars can actually be used in community. And we're trying to stay true to that. And it's not always fun.
I have one final question. It has to do with the obligated amounts. And I understand under the Treasury what they're doing. What happens if monies are not spent? I mean, we're talking about, this is what we have unobligated or unassigned. That's a 7 million. Do you have a policy in regard to things that maybe don't come in at the obligation level that you said?
That's part of the reason why we want to move to that 6-month rotation, is so that we can take a look every 6 months and say, are you spending as expected, so that we don't leave anything on the table.
With that, again, I don't want to keep badgering on that, but it for the unobligated, I should say, for the obligated that's not spent, are you seeking guidance so that you don't have to keep coming back and reallocating, or will there be some direction? How are you going to deal with that?
I think every local government ARPA recipient is going through those same questions. I can tell you, at least from serving on national cohorts with governments from across the country, we're all battling the same thing. There is a lot of pressure on the Treasury to consider extending their timelines, but we're going to assume that that's not going to happen. We're going to do our best to make any reallocations that need to happen before the end of 24. under the assumption that anything we don't spend by the end of 2026, the treasury could take back. That's the assumption that we're
So
working.
we're not the only ones, or I'm not the only one sweating bullets?
Every, oh, trust me, every ARPA manager from across the country.
I'm just not hearing it from any of our peers here in Oregon. Am I just being?
But Dorian's
stupid?
world is different than,
Yeah.
than the world you're looking at. I think that's why.
So I think what we can do is we can further define what that 6-month process is to give the board some assurance on kind of what does that review look like to ensure that once we get to the end of ARPA, that there aren't dollars on the table. I think that helps those our community-based organization that we're contracting with, and it also helps the board. So we can clarify it. And at a staff level, Chair, I think I'll say maybe that's staff are concerned about this, but we are actively working through it, you know, with our partners and learning from other organizations. And I think that's why electeds hire staff to deal with those kind of issues and to make sure that we're not leaving money on the table and we get the dollars out the door.
Honestly, I feel very well served by the diligence that you all practice. It's really going to take us a few more months here in 2023. I'm looking at your wonderful ARPA phases timeline because you know I love timelines. So, you know, before we know it, it's going to be July and we will have somehow survived our budget process, still liking one another. And so we're really only going to have 6 months, 2 6-month cycles where you're able to get these dollars into action, get feedback from our community partners so that by the middle of 2024, we can go, okay, how do we make sure we are successful in fully obligating these dollars by December 31st? Because we always pull a fast one on you in November and December and don't really meet 4 weeks of the year, of the month, each of those months. So I know we pull a crunch time on you. So, but based upon your track record to date, I know we're going to be very well served.
Well, I think it's also important to recognize the committee that you've been working with as well. So thank you to Chair and to Commissioner Willie for the work that you've put in to get us where we are as well. So
thank you. I'll take that.
well, it's genuine.
Before we close, if I could summarize to make sure that I have the right guidance for my team, am I understanding correctly that we do indeed want to move forward with resilience as an overarching theme
Yes.
and continue with the same values you committed to?
Yes.
You are indeed directing staff to consider reallocation options for that approximately 7 million to come back to you in March.
Yes.
Yes. And finally, for the tranche 2 allocation options, I'm hearing an interest in seeing potentially 2 or 3 scenarios that balance the need to invest in facilities and community resilience, potentially with that $7 million.
Yes.
I'm not married to 2 or 3.
We'll review.
because You've gotten pretty clear feedback from a number of us, but at least one. So I expect per your next steps that we'll have information in March, and depending upon when it is, you may or may not be all done with your crew feedback. But it sounds like we're going to have 2 touch points in March. And I think that's probably going to include a pretty thick document that helps me understand that community feedback so that that I'll understand that we really did ask for feedback and this is what that gift of feedback is so that I'm comfortable providing my 1 of 5 direction for that second touch point and then that April those April touch points. Does that-
Absolutely.
Does that match up?
Yeah, for the feedback, it won't just be the feedback. We'll make sure that that information includes what was the process to
Oh,
get-
yeah.
get to that feedback
Yeah.
as well.
Does that include the, what was, so there's crew, but there's also that community engagement, joint community engagement with Beaverton and
Yes,
Hillsborough?
that's crew. We all share the crew.
Oh,
So the
I didn't
IGA that
say.
you passed to pool ARPA funding together with cities, it's the same membership as crew. We just have a sleeker name now.
And that's the importance of the process to get. the
Yep.
feedback.
Yes.
one. Got it.
Thank
A
you.
lot there.
Any other questions?
Learned a lot. Thank you. Keep up the good work. I bet it's gonna be easier and clearer come March. Okay, we have one more topic and it's on MSTIP, which is another big and mighty topic. So I recommend we take a short break.
I was glad to hear you say that.
You don't want to deal with these minds that are all boggled right
Actually,
now?
Chair, we have two.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
I forgot to turn the page. I do this all the time.
We have,
Okay,
we have a light.
we're
one,
definitely
the
taking a break.
MSTIP, that's the easy one. And then we've
10 minutes or 15?
affordable housing.
10-minute break.
SHS.
1, 2, 3, go. We're gonna be back here at 3:20.
Thinking about evening.
$4.50. And he did work for me.
Minutes ago.
Oh, I.
Yeah, there's.
He's gonna keep, I can guarantee you that he's gonna keep that chit.
Because I think somebody else has one on me too.
He's a CPO. You gotta watch those inflations.
So, staff, you have our full attention.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm back. We had a presentation last month about transportation funding generally. That was part of a series of work sessions, sort of talking about transportation related topics. So we're here today with an update around MSTIP. We'll be back in a month to talk a little bit more about MSTIP. So today really is informational. So we just want to share some information with you and get some feedback and input. In March, we'll be coming back again with some additional info and really maybe looking for some direction from your board at that time on strategies to address some challenges that we're going to be talking about around cost escalation as we're working through our committed capital projects, and then thinking about how we are transitioning our selves to think about our future transportation project priorities. And then in March 14th, then we'll be coming back as part of a larger discussion around the countywide capital improvement plan. So really today, there's sort of three topics. We'll be talking a little bit about current conditions, how we are going to respond to some of those current conditions, and then thinking about how we position ourselves for future success. So current conditions, just status of current projects, near-term actions, just thinking about, again, as we're moving into a capital improvement plan process across the county, how that affects our work, thinking about our strategies for addressing a potential reduction in the general fund transfer amount into the MSTIP program for this coming budget year. And we know we need to prepare for a bond sale for our bonding cost sharing projects. And then again, the long-term strategy, just really, again, thinking about how we feel or think about our transportation priorities in the context of other pressing needs across the county and the community. And then really today, we're just trying to prep for future conversations as well. So the policy question today really is just, do you have questions or input on the things that we talk about here today, and other questions or information needs? So just a little refresher, this is a slide actually from the presentation that we did last time, really looking at MSTIP in the context of our overall transportation funding program at the county, or different revenue sources. And so we talked about last month, MSTIP, as you all know, began as a series of levies back in the 1980s. And when Measure 50 happened, the levy rate that was in effect at the time was reduced and became a part of the county's base property tax rate at that time. Since that time, the board has implemented a policy of continuing to significantly set aside a significant share of general fund for transportation purposes. And each year that allocation has changed based on assessed value growth. Again, the purposes of the program really looking to improve that countywide transportation system. So we really do focus on the major streets is the primary intended class of roads that we're working on in this program. And then I think it's really important that we are either funding programs directly here locally, or we're also using that funding to leverage local and other local money, state money, or federal money. And then the eligibility criteria are on the slide as well. We won't go through all of those today, but just wanted to have that in the materials. And then there is the bonding cost sharing program, also part of the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program. And so it was a partnership that was designed to help get a little bit of a jump start on some significant transportation needs in and around some urban growth boundary expansions that happened in the first part of the 2000s. And we were also very concerned about making sure that the needs in those areas didn't take away, if you will, from our ability to continue meeting longstanding deficiencies in other parts of the county as well. So the idea was to really create two different sort of parallel programs, if you will. One continues to be the pay-as-you-go program, which I alluded to earlier, than the bonding cost sharing program. So this works in concept very similar to something like tax increment financing. If you're familiar with that concept, you sort of freeze the base, if you will. So we did that at 35 million per year, goes into the pay-as-you-go program. And then as the assessed value increases or the MSTIP general fund allocation increases year over year, that additional funding has been used to pay down debt service for the bonds here in the bonding cost sharing program. And the
Question on that.
yes,
Your previous slide said 21-22 was 34.6 million. So if we,
yes.
so does that mean where do we pay the bond out of there if the 35 million comes off the top?
So that's really the pay-as-you-go amount. That's the amount that actually moves into the MSTIP fund, if you will. And then the additional money doesn't come into the MSTIP program. It's actually just being finance handles it, but it comes off the top, so to speak, and then is used to retire the debt service that we took out for the bonding cost.
34.6 is net of the debt service.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a great question. Thank you. And then some of the program objectives are here, right? So, and the areas that are beneficiaries, and I think that's it. Yeah. So we want to talk a little bit about where we are now with our current projects. And so when Measure 50 happened, at that point, the MSTIP 3 levy was in place. And so as we transitioned into the board allocating funding and selecting projects for the ongoing program, now supported by the general fund transfers, we've simply been calling those additional project cycles 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E, and now we're potentially talking about a 3F program coming up in the future here. So all of the 3B and 3C projects have been completed. We're still in process on some of our MSTIP 3D projects and 3E projects, and I have some charts that we'll take a quick peek at. So the current condition that we wanted to highlight here is that we do have up to a $70 million difference in costs between our original project estimates for the 3D and 3E projects. And just a reminder, those estimates were done back in sort of 2011, 2012, and 2015, 2016 timeframe. And then the difference between those initial estimates and what we anticipate are the actual costs to complete these projects. In terms of timing, we think most of the projects that were allocated in the 3D program could be completed around the end of 2024. And again, that's going to be subject to just ensuring that we have the funding available to move those forward. Several of our 3E projects are also completed. We continue working on a number of those, and we have a number already in construction right now or in the design permitting phase and very close to being construction ready. And again, we can move those projects forward as we think about how we just continue to sort of sequence out the funding. And the bonding cost sharing program, those projects, we anticipate we have about a $65 million remaining cost to complete on those projects. And that is about $14 million more than we'd estimated back in about 2015 when that program was approved. And so we did, as I mentioned, an initial bond sale in 2016. We're actually retiring that debt in the current fiscal year. And we've known for a long time we'll need an additional bond sale or perhaps a series of bond sales to continue delivering those projects. So I won't spend much time on the charts here. They're in your board packet and in a memo that was included in the packet. But we just wanted, we thought these were quite helpful just in terms of illustrating the timing and how we envision these programs playing out in terms of project delivery. So that was 3D, this is 3E, and the gray, I should mention the gray cells, those are projects that have been completed. The projects that are in the different colors indicate the projects that are still in process. And what you'll notice on these is that you do see a lot of projects that in theory could complete construction in the 24-25 and 25-26 timeframe. And the bonding cost sharing program, and as well, you see the last of those projects could be delivered really by the end of calendar year 2025 or midpoint of around the middle of 25-26.
Good job. Let's get them done.
Yes, that's music to my ears. Okay, so knowing that we have some gaps that we need to address here, and then also as we're starting a pivot to think about how we frame our future transportation needs, we're continuing our work to refine the countywide capital improvement plan, which includes a transportation element. Again, the CIP is a way to implement multiple, operationalize, if you will, multiple county plans, which includes transportation. Other things included in there will be the facilities and parks and information technology systems. So again, it's a tool to help your board prioritize current and future community and organizational needs, and it does do a 5-year sort of look ahead. And then you would adjust it each year. So it does provide a good annual check-in point so that we can keep you appraised of what's happening in all of our different programs, and we can make incremental adjustments as needed. And again, it's a tool for really kind of matching those prioritized needs that are identified across the county with the different funding sources. And so in the past, we really have taken a kind of funding-based approach to project prioritization. So we say, okay, we have some assumed MSTIP revenues. What are our priorities? We have some assumed urban road maintenance district revenues. What are those priorities? And this will really sort of put all of the needs into one list. And then we'll obviously need to make sure that the various projects are eligible for various funding sources, but it just gives you a way to, I think, take a more holistic look at what all of those different needs are. And again, just helps achieve consistency with county and community goals. So as I mentioned, we're also preparing for that second bond sale. And as I mentioned, that could be a single sale or it could be multiple smaller sales. And so we're working with Greg in finance to think about how that would potentially play out. And then again, just looking at some potential future project priorities. So we were in the process of determining priorities for a future round of MSTIP projects. We've paused that work a little bit while we catch up here and figure out what our next steps look like and then how we move forward. But we do think it's important that we can go ahead and get a few more projects in the design pipeline, and that does a couple of things. It helps us to just ensure that when we complete construction on some of our current projects, we have other projects that are in the queue ready to go. And then it can also help us be successful as we're competing for increased federal grants. So there's more money out there, and we want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and competing for those funds.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So 3D and 3E were short 70 million. Bonded projects were short 14 million. So what's the second bonding process? Why are we doing the second bonding? Is that to cover those, or what are we doing with the second bond?
Yeah, so when we sold bonds initially for the bonding cost sharing program, we didn't sell all of the bonds that we would need. We sold about $50 million at that point.
Those you could obligate
within 3 years,
five-
correct?
5-year
Oh, I
time
see,
frame.
yeah. Okay, I'm with you there. So we got
Right.
we want more capacity of what we originally authorized.
Right. And well, yeah, so we always knew there would be multiple bond sales that would be needed. We actually anticipated, when we started this process, we anticipated we'd have done that second bond sale by now. But because of the way things have played out over time, things have taken a bit longer to deliver. So we find ourselves now at the point where it's the time to do that second bond sale. And it actually happens to coincide nicely with the fact that we're retiring the debt service from that initial bond sale in this current fiscal year.
So we're going to use the money from this second bond cost sharing to finance more projects that were designated as bonded projects.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yep. That's a great question as well. Thank you. Greg's in the room. I think I heard 5% last week.
Still fits on one hand.
Not anymore.
Oh.
There you go. You spoke too soon.
And I think that's an important consideration is that bonding rates obviously are higher than they have been in the recent past. They're not historically high, certainly, but And so I think one approach that we may consider, and Greg and I have chatted about this a bit, is do we think about multiple smaller bond sales so that we only take on the amount of debt that may be needed to just sort of keep things moving. And then when it's time for an additional sale, perhaps we may be able to secure that at a lower rate.
What was the rate in 2016?
I did not handle the financing back then, but that's a
Probably
good
2.
question.
No, it was higher.
Was it?
Yeah.
This is before the Great Recession.
4 or 5 probably.
So we're not that far off.
So, but we're also not gonna get any
Also,
premiums
can't
on this
because
bond
it'll go
sale,
up.
so are we thinking?
Oh, that's why you want to lock it in. while it's low.
Dollar for dollar bond sale, what we're gonna get?
And I
I might ask if Greg wants to join.
could still get.
This gets a little outside of my territory. We deliver projects. We have other folks. that
And you
we
give the
really-
bill to Greg.
We would.
Let me
I
introduce
like
my
that.
financial advisor.
We like to tag team. So I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full.
Well, it's like, I was remembering back when we sold the WACA bonds. We thought we were gonna go on the market for 70 something and we ended up getting 91 or something. That's when interest rates were really, really low and life was good. Not so much now. So we put, I don't know, 20 million out in a bond sale. We're gonna get 20 million. Not less, right? We're gonna get, but not the premium that we've enjoyed in the past.
That'd be correct. What our financial advisor will tell us is they'll give us a little bit of a conservative rate so we have a little bit of a buffer there in terms of planning our cash flow. And now is a good time to look at it that way versus the other way around. If the rates were low or maybe falling.
And we're gonna incorporate the cost of selling these bonds into that whole process.
Yeah, it's called an all-inclusive rate or an all-include TIC rate, and that includes the cost of issuance, and it's all bundled together, and that's really what you finance over the course of 10 years or 15 years. Yeah.
Okay,
Stay tuned
thank
to
you.
hear more about those numbers.
Thank you. Yeah. It's good to have friends.
With money.
You only get one from a friend, buddy. You gotta run this
Your
alone.
lifeline.
Erin's behind you, so she'll back you up.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah, so I did want to just, let's see. So as we're, okay, where was I? Considering the future. Okay. And I do think then, so our future project priorities, we talked a little bit about that, the benefits of doing that. And again, I think that all sort of ties into our capital improvement plan process. So looking ahead through that next 5 years. Okay. And so also near-term actions, we're also adapting to that, as I mentioned, sort of what our current reality is here. So we are going to be looking at some strategies to help mitigate the potential 23-24 general fund transfer reduction. That's based on the 4-7-10% reductions that general fund funds are being asked to consider in this upcoming budget. And then I mentioned earlier, the cost escalation. So we're certainly not alone in this. All agencies are just seeing cost escalation that we have never seen before, certainly not in my career. And so, we're all just having to make adjustments to adapt to that reality. And so things that we may be looking at here include things like reducing project scope. That may make sense in some cases, not in others. We may be looking at extending some of those project delivery timelines a little bit further out. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, we want to continue seeking grant funding. We've already submitted a couple of grant applications for projects that we think may be good candidates. We may talk to some of our partner agencies. Are there opportunities for them to bring funding? Are there opportunities for the county to bring additional funding to certain projects? So things like transportation development tax revenues, for instance. And we just touched on earlier, there may be opportunities to consider some debt financing for some of these projects as well, and pay as you go, or some combination of those two things. And as I mentioned earlier, we've sort of paused our work on the MSTIP 23-28 allocation process. We just need to sort of understand the lay of the land right now, think about how we move forward. And then are there at least a few of those projects that were under discussion there that we might want to move into at least the project development process, because that just takes longer than it used to. So considerations as we're doing that evaluation, I think we'll be thinking about what are potential community impacts if we end up delaying a project or reducing the scope of the project. We'll need to be mindful if we have agreements in place. So some of our partners like Willamette Water Supply, we have specific agreements with that we're going to do projects in a certain amount of time. We have questions about project readiness. So if we have a project that's really ready to go for construction, pausing that project may not make sense because it's only going to cost more if we delay it. So, and then I think finally back to the question of about availability of other funding. So if there are other funding sources that can help us to deliver a particular project, then I think that's an important consideration as we think about how to continue moving it along. And then I think, and as we're pivoting, thinking about the longer term, right? So this is also now continuing to work with our partner agencies, the cities here in the county, working with ODOT, TriMet, and others, and really thinking about what our future transportation improvements needs are and how those best meet community needs. And so we know, as Tanya mentioned earlier, there will continue to be pressure on the general fund. This is not necessarily just a one-time thing this year, and we know that needs always outstrip the funding, and so we have to continue doing good work thinking about how we prioritize those. So equity focus, community engagement, we know that those are going to be key for how we get input back and help prioritize those funds. And then again, the capital improvement plan is a great tool for these kinds of efforts here, and that will both inform and guide the work that we're going to be doing here in the longer term. And cost escalation. So it obviously is a challenge. We are starting to see some good news in that the rate of escalation has slowed significantly. I wouldn't say it's stopped, but at least it seems a little bit more manageable right now. And then it is just taking longer to build things. And so I think we've got to adjust to that reality as well. Project development takes longer. Construction might also take longer depending on complexity. So, and then we know that there are some big regional transit projects that are being planned. So there's Southwest Corridor and there's a TV Highway Bus Rapid Transit plan that's in play. And so over time, we can anticipate that the county will be asked to help pitch in funding to support those regional planning efforts. So we want to keep that obviously in mind as we're thinking about our future. And then I think all of this sort of leads us to the conclusion that we need to be innovative and creative in how we approach these things. We may need to be thinking about new ways to fund projects or new funding sources. We may need to think about public-private partnerships to a greater extent than we have, and think about creative project delivery approaches. So there's a variety of things that we just need to be thinking about so that we continue to be nimble and move ourselves forward in a good direction. So just a few things that are happening here real soon. We do have a WCCC, Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting on Monday next week. And so we'll be providing them a similar update to what you're receiving today, and just letting them know that we're starting these conversations. As I mentioned, I'll be back on March 7th. We'll talk some more about MSTIP, and then we'll have a larger team back on March 14th about the Transportation Improvement Program. So of course, we're in the midst of budget preparation right now. So that's ongoing work, and continuing to refine the capital improvement plan, which is a part of our budget planning suite of tools. And we'll be doing some ongoing coordination with our city partners around how we're going to be moving forward with these projects, the things that we just talked about. So that essentially concludes what I was going to say. And
board members, any questions or comments on these near-term actions and long-term approaches?
I just have a short question, and it really involves you, is that, is there any, will there be any problem at WCCC without having a commissioner at that meeting?
Um, Probably not. I mean, I think we're comfortable talking about what we're presenting here and,
Oh, that's next Monday and
Yeah,
we're gone.
yeah, we're gone.
Yeah, Brenda and I
So, has
entertained
anything
maybe
else
calling
going
in.
On Monday during
Mm.
WCC.
Mhm.
You're gonna try to call in?
Brenda and I entertained the idea of maybe calling in, but there's a time difference and
Mhm.
it's like, so.
Yeah.
Sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was just curious if it would be difficult for you.
Mhm. We can do this.
I think you
those
can.
mayors are easy.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
even.
Mhm.
That's why I asked.
Well, I'll just say that well, first I'll say, thank you for the work that you've been putting into this. Really useful, insightful to understand all the great work that's underway right now. So I appreciated all that categorization that you've done. I also really appreciate the work that the colleagues before us have put into this program. Making the most of what you did before. Thank you
Looking at my
very
calendar
much.
For Monday.
Oh, no, I was picking on you. I was paying you a compliment, sir.
I was.
The transportation sector is one of those that when you fall behind, the results are quite visible. That's one reason why our predecessors proposed the MSTIP 1 program to the voters, then MSTIP 2, then MSTIP 3. As a resident, I only got to weigh in on 3. But the reason for that was to ensure that we weren't falling behind at the same pace that had been happening before the MSTIP program, because folks like me were moving to this area. So we were putting additional strain on what we used to refer to as our farm to market roads, which are alive and crumbling back in New England, I'll say. So when this sector falls behind, the results tend to be quite visible with people. See, 4 straightforward ones: more congestion, right? More backups, more crashes. I want to get where I want to go. Why are there all these cars in front of me? Well, maybe I could speed faster or take this shortcut. Not always advisable. Or they're damaged roads, let alone closures. Boy, I mean, our team's done terrific work when there have been bridges that have become safety problems and really regrouping. So just want to say thank you for putting together, going through the problem solving and putting together these near-term actions. I am very supportive. I really appreciate the level of characterization underneath the long-term approaches. I was, yes. See, I bolded it because it's like, yes, yes, I want that. Of course we want to do that. That's good work. So big thumbs up. Does anyone else want to be verbal like me?
Comment, but go ahead.
So animated, Chair Hurd.
It's the sugar from the cookies.
It's my fault. You could add coffee. Go ahead, Roy. I'll.
No, I'll make it fast. Nafisha, if you're not able to call in, I just looked at my calendar. I'm fine. I'll sit in for you.
Okay.
So you got somebody if you need them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brenda, could you send info the agenda and the link to sign in to Commissioner Rogers? Thank you.
Yeah, just let me know. So I
Yeah.
prepare.
I think she just did.
Oh, I didn't hear. It. She was just checking.
I heard this.
No,
Accepting that
Yeah.
operationalizing it for success.
I was asking Brenda to send you all the information you need
Oh, okay.
to successfully attend that meeting and contribute.
All right. I'm happy to.
Because it's the first time.
The answer is yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know anybody there.
Most,
There are a few people. There are a few.
yeah. Anyway, back to what I. Yeah, we get.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. This is just Roy's thoughts, and I'm gonna make it real quick and then make a couple of suggestions. About a year and a half ago, I said bond like crazy. I could see it coming. And I knew that you could go out and bond at 2% and we were gonna have high inflation. And for a variety of reasons, we didn't. And so I don't believe, and I might be 100% wrong. This is Roy's prediction. I don't think we're gonna go in any big recession. And I think that we're gonna have some mild, but I think prices are gonna continue to increase. So my first recommendation, if I'm at all right, swing for the fences, go out and issue a big bond. Do it, because what you can always do is refund it. Greg knows how to do that, and so we can do a refunding issue and pay those things off with new funds. You won't regret it, I promise you. Secondly, I would look at real quickly the program that we did, and you pointed out regarding the 1/3, 2/3. That was wildly successful. Not everything's been done. You still got some money to go. But having an investment by our city partners cuts about 1/3 off of our costs and gets some very needed projects. So I think it's a time to be more aggressive, or I might be 100% wrong, and I apologize if I am, but that's my prediction. I would swing for the fences and I would get that 1/3, 2/3 program going. And I think if you're going to still see 7 to 10, 11, 12% per year, you're not going to regret it. The point was asked here a minute ago about what was the bond rate, 4 or 5%. Try 9 or 10, and then on top of that, you got the debt service as well. So I mean, it's foolish not to do it. So I know it didn't resonate a year and a half ago when I said bond, but please take a look at it in the numbers. I think that you'd be really well served to do that. So that's my comments.
We have some really great data for that decision making now that we didn't have then.
Yep.
Good job.
Just to respond to that, Roy, and it wasn't part of my question, but if I remember correctly, though, there was other factors as to why there was hesitancy on bonding, and it was purely, could we even get the jobs done within the time frame? And giving the money back is not an option to me because we've already paid money to get it. I'm not going to pay money to give it back. So anyway, that's just some of the thoughts that I think, and might still be some of the concerns. I mean, we get $100 million. We may have trouble getting those projects done within the time frame that we're required to do that. So anyway, for me, my complete focus is always on slide 13, where one of the bullet points is ongoing pressure on the county general fund. I know Tanya and I have had more than one conversation about this, but this money has been earmarked for years since we had to, since it went into the general fund as a transportation thing. So it was actually, to me, if our general fund is $250 million, we reduce it by 34 million, and that's what we deal with. And we've been doing that for years. So I understand that it does come out of the general fund, but the only way you rectify that is you don't give as much to transportation. That's a whole different discussion. So that's the only thing I watch for it. Currently, we have these shortfalls as Stephen has indicated, 3D and E are 70 million short. I'd probably advocate we put a pause on future projects on F, and we finish up the projects from DE with that money if we have to do that.
But don't these lines reflect having those issues solved?
Right. And I think that's really our point, is that we think now's the time to go ahead and get some additional projects in the design. And that's a low spend rate to start designing the projects, but we want to have them queued up and hopefully ready for construction as others are completed.
Yeah, I get that, but it wouldn't be 35 million.
No, that's right.
So, well, I guess that, I don't know. I could ask Joe back there. He could probably tell you, but anyway, no, I guess that's not what I was looking at, is just we slow down F to bring D and E up forward, and then we start rolling out in the front, because we got to we gotta come up with $70 million someplace, and if that's what our bonding is gonna look like, well, okay, I guess it's okay, but the more bonding we have, the less 35 million we have, so it comes
Right.
out of someplace.
Yeah, yeah. A way to think about this, it really is sort of managing cash flow. I mean, that's an element of this. And so how do we best manage the available resources to deliver the projects in the most effective way over time? That's really what we're trying to tease out here.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I think you're doing a great job. I do echo the same comments the chair did. You guys are doing a lot of heavy lifting here. I appreciate it. So.
If I could just segue off of this, I just want to make sure as you go through the WCCC conversation, is this best case? So for example, if it's anything less than 35 million, with these timelines for completion move out? That's all. Just be
I'll just,
prepared.
yeah,
You
I'll
don't have
look to the
think
team.
it
Yeah, we'll think about that. Yeah.
Online.
Which slide are you looking at?
Oh,
Those were the progress status
those
charts.
are the.
Oh, yeah, I've
Yeah.
got that in a different place. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Project status, yep, I get
Mhm.
that. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Well,
That's all.
anything else? Thank you
Onward, ho we go,
Yep.
So much.
doing our best. The current reality.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, and now at 4 o'clock, we have our final topic of the day, affordable housing bond and supportive housing services quarterly update. And yes, for those of you watching, the sugar from that chocolate chip cookie is still present. I am so glad I had it. Still
Not so
present.
sure about the rest of us. You're making me tired.
So
I'm sorry.
the VIG must be 56.
What?
The VIG,
Wait,
you
wait,
know, the VIG,
no, wait. Is that the,
All right.
that's the interest.
oh, okay.
Do this in 5 minutes before the sugar wears off. No. Worst case, I'll just.
It'd be tough to do this.
Things
in
good,
5
see you
minutes,
later.
but We'll try.
5 minutes. Sugar's about to wear off. I
Jess
know,
says
you
okay.
know. Jess has known me many, many, many years. Please take it away.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. My name is Komi Calavo, Housing Director. We are pleased to give you 2 updates today. This is for the regional voter approved measures, the Affordable Housing Bond and the Supportive Housing Services Bond. So last quarter, we gave you a written update, so we're pleased to be here in person. Andrew Crampton, our new development manager, will do the Affordable Housing Bond, and then Jess will follow with the Supportive Housing Services Bond. Real quickly, I know it's been a long day for you. Major milestone for the Affordable Housing Bond, except for $3.5 million, we have allocated every dollar of that program. So it's a 7-year goal. We are ahead of the curve. And you see in one of the slides that we are exceeding the expectations on that program. So we're pleased with that. Jess will provide you the supporting housing services, work on homelessness. Another major milestone there is since the inception of the program, we have housed 1,000 formerly homeless people. So we are also very pleased with that. It's a tremendous amount of work, outreach, working with partners. And I'm not even going to get into our accounting work, getting the money out and ensuring that the invoices are done properly, because we want to be audit ready for all this funding. So that's another layer of work that we haven't really discussed with your board.
Way back in 2018, Comey.
Okay.
Could you have imagined that 5 years forward, you would have achieved that milestone?
No. I think it took your support as the board, obviously, county administration and all our partners. But we push hard, and with your support, I think we're almost there.
You've been working in this industry for decades, and I'm so happy that you've had that experience in your career.
All I do is push, and then we have a team. And so we are pleased with our progress so far. So with that, I'll hand you over to Andrew and Jess.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Andrew Crampton. I'm the new Development Manager with Washington County. Just a quick background on myself. Prior to this position, I spent a few years on the housing team as a development coordinator, supporting the great work that we're going to talk to today. And then prior to that, I worked in local government in Washington County as a planner and housing policy, supporting land use entitlement and development services. So I'm pleased to be here. I'll walk through today a few quarterly update components and then hand it over to Jess Larson to speak to the supportive housing services. And then we're able to take questions at any time or at the end as well. A few updates for the agenda. This will walk through construction progress photo on some of the key projects that you'll see going up vertical in Washington County currently. They're structured roughly in order of next completion. We're going to have a busy summer of celebration and grand openings. So that'll be an exciting time. The next vertical construction project that will open is Terrace Glen. As you see in front of you, very large project, largest project that's funded in Washington County with Metro bonds, over 144 units. Related Northwest is the sponsor, and the Housing Authority of Washington County is a special managing partner as well on the project. Over 51 units are deeply affordable at 30% AMI, with 8 project-based vouchers and 3 permanent supportive housing units. And this will be a late May completion date. The next project that you see above is Aloha Family Housing that has recently reached the topped out completion. This photo right here is facing south on TV Highway. So a very exciting change in the area.
Yeah. We were sweating, real sweat.
Yeah, nothing was.
It's great to see it. I drove by there a little while ago. That still looked a Rector set. So this is a cool view.
It was a really interesting drone photo that was taken. So great perspective that you can see facing south on TV Highway. Some exciting things about this project that's sponsored by Bridge Housing and then also Hacienda CDC as a service provider. Over 33 units are deeply affordable to families making 30% or less of the area median income. And there's 48 family-sized units.
You should make a hard copy of this to provide to Congresswoman Bonamici.
Along with the
when we're
CD.
there at NACO.
Maybe we can ask. I'll be here tomorrow. I can pick.
The next project coming online is Plaza Los Amigos, second largest project sponsored in Washington County, over 113 units. This is a unique development partnership between 2 longstanding nonprofits in the area, Vienna Star and Reach CDC. Really interesting partnership with that component with service provisions. This is scheduled for completion in late summer. A lot of vertical work is really starting and hitting the ground running at a rapid pace now. It's a very large site, had a lot of site work associated adjacent to the Fred Meyer and Cornelius, and is scheduled again for late summer completion.
Yeah, it's much more developed than that. I just drove by it about 2 days ago and it's coming out of the ground fast. And it's right alongside Council Creek Trail.
That was also the hottest day ever, that groundbreaking day. Tommy was there. I was.
Tigard Senior Housing will complete the summer of celebration. Also a late August scheduled completion date, 58 units in Tigard. This will be for senior housing for folks 62 years of age and older. 58 units on donated land, showing really the city of Tigard's leadership in supporting housing, and will be adjacent to the Tigard Senior Center. So lots of partnerships planned between the 2 entities to be able to take advantage of the amenities in Tigard.
What is that other little building? Because it nothing looks like that. That cream colored one to the left.
To the right of the flag.
Where the flag, I think it might be the senior center with a new paint job.
It doesn't look like the senior center.
No. I think this is an artist's rendering.
Okay, I just thought they'd make it look realistic as to what it looks like.
Pam just barely qualifies for that.
Let's not go there.
And then scheduled for a little bit later completion in fall is Saltzman Road, 54 units in Cedar Mill unincorporated. This project recently, the project team has worked on a new name, Opal Apartments. So it'll be an interesting component to celebrate. And it's also in partnership with First United Methodist Church, great partnership with the faith-based community in the area. Couple components. First, today through your board's action is to congratulate Community Partners for Affordable Housing, CEPA, on successfully receiving recommended concept endorsement to Metro for the Woodland Hearth project. That will expend all but $3.45 million in funding. The Washington County team will work on alignment and supporting the other applicants. They're really all great projects, over $50 million in funding requests and Metro Housing bond funds. That work will begin with working with the second place applicant, Reach CDC, on Dartmouth Crossing Phase 2, on opportunities for alignment with available Metro Housing bond funds. There is an open lift application through the state that can be a great opportunity to pair Metro Housing bond funds with those funding opportunities. So we look forward to working with that applicant as well as the other applicants on great projects to creatively structure upcoming funding opportunities and potential support as needed to be able to move really all the projects forward that have submitted, because they all serve a need and have a great partnership team and sponsorship. And that really belies the third point, which is the project quality demonstrates a future funding need and an opportunity in Washington County to be able to advance these and other projects forward. The demand is there, the capability is there with these teams. It's just really a measure of being creative and finding opportunities to leverage future funding sources. So this chart will show with today's board action. The chart on the item on the right column is the projected unit count. The goals in total of 814 units, 112 have been met. And then with today's action, 875 units of new homes in Washington County. And you can see going down some of the priorities that have been set through the county's local implementation strategy. Over 440 family size units, 344 deeply affordable units, 531 that are still within the target range of 30 to 60, and over 185 permanent supportive housing units. So that really shows where we are today in the projection with 11 funded projects in Washington County.
Can I ask you a question? Because I'm confused on that last line. I thought all of these would be permanent affordable housing.
They are. It's permanent supportive housing.
So
That's
maybe
the
I need
one
to
that
understand.
provides the services. So the wraparound service.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
PSH.
Oh, okay, thanks. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions, but go ahead first.
I'm fine.
Okay. Feel free to change to the next slide. I'm so excited about the colors. So I haven't been by in a few weeks now, but I started them, or I saw them starting the painting, and I was just so excited. I have a couple of questions. I believe, but this is old knowledge, that the property at Baseline and 170th in Washington County near the Elmonica Transit Center was acquired by Metro in cooperation with Beaverton for affordable housing. And the property's been cleared, but it's still just sitting there. Could you inquire for us about the status of that lot? And I don't know if there are any other projects outstanding in Washington County. I know the Hillsborough one's under construction. That's very exciting. The Marianne was done, and the two projects, one of ours, one of theirs, up at South Cooper Mountain. But I think that's the whole portfolio of affordable housing bond projects in Washington County, if I'm right. But feel free to come at me with corrected knowledge.
That's absolutely correct. One component, and this would be good to schedule a future update, is there is a site acquisition fund that Metro staff are leading, but coordinating with Washington County staff. It's $12.9 million for acquisition of available sites. That team has been working hard on opportunities and do have some potential opportunities to move forward. That would be timely to schedule a future board update, but the intent with that fund is to acquire 1 or 2 additional sites in Washington County to support affordable housing.
Terrific, but only for the site acquisition, not for the construction.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's how
Okay, which leads to my second question. You did such a good job, and we're hearing that there's still need. So I'm left wanting. What direction might you need to come back to us with just some sketch of what the remaining need is? I'm not ready to start an engagement program to explore having a Washington County only affordable housing bond. But I do want to better understand the need because, as you say, the demand is there, the need is there, the capability is there, but I can't quite get my head around that yet. So I would like to go from total fog to just a big foggy blob.
Could I ask another question that's right in there is, when does the affordable housing bond expire?
The program was estimated to be completed within 5 to 7 years. The bond funding, I can't remember if it was a 15 or a 20-year bond. It was a 20-year bond.
5 to 7 years from
2018.
2018.
It was
Okay.
approved.
So we're
in
right,
November.
we're approaching that zone here. I just wanted to put that in my brain too.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I think what I would appreciate from the board is just board direction for staff to work on kind of what that high level
First sketch.
Yep.
Not a
high level
guesstimate
option
even.
would be.
Yep.
Am I seeing nods from the board?
Yes.
I'm nervous about any income tax.
High level, this is not,
No,
this is, yeah.
We're not even
wouldn't-
talking financing.
Was Cedar Grove part of affordable housing bond? No, that was before. Okay.
I have 2 questions for you. And one of them is very, very wonky and technical. The first one is an easy one. This is my observation, I'm probably wrong, but down in Tigard, we've got 4 or 5 projects really close to my office, and I see District 2 not having a lot, and I think that District 1, which has a great need based upon the demographics of the area, not having a lot. Are we looking in those areas for additional opportunities?
We have the one that's being built on Saltzman.
That's it though. Got 5 within my, in just a short range. So.
I'm sorry, this is a little out of my lane, but one point of context is, in the case of the affordable housing bond, the funds were distributed to 3 jurisdictions in Washington County, the city of Beaverton, the city of Hillsborough, and unincorporated Washington County for the share. So there are several projects that are being led by each city of Beaverton and city of Hillsborough.
Yeah, I just know that everybody needs an opportunity in theirs. Okay. My really wonky one, and this is, call me, I gotta ask you, because I know you're really smart on this thing. You know, the tax credits that really make these projects run. And we're what, a 99% owner partially, and then 1%, all of the tax credits go to that 1%. If we could capture those and sell those on the market, it didn't have to give them up. It would provide a lot of funding for future projects. I mean, there's huge tax credit.
The low income housing tax credits that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a federal program that was delegated to the states. So we go to the state for our allocation.
But do we have to give them up to the developer, or could we keep some of those?
Well, if you don't have taxable income, it's of no use to you.
You sell them.
Yeah, that's what we do with our affordable housing projects. The state awards it, then we sell it to the highest bidder. When I first started working
How we
here,
were given to the developer, we're not.
oh no, they sell them for equity.
But they sell them, we don't.
Yeah.
That's-
We are tax exempt organization.
That's the only way.
That they
can do
work.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that they were, but somehow I thought they were ending up with them and they were taking that to help finance the project. We weren't.
Yeah, 2-3 decades ago, yeah, you could, but nowadays the market is very
It doesn't work
matured,
that way.
so you sell them to
I was just
insurance
trying to figure out how we get some more money. Yeah,
companies.
if we could use it, could do a couple more projects. All right, thank you.
Could you remind us again, that with the bond, I have this very vague recollection of the numbers 4% and 9%. Were those different levels of income tax?
Right, so the 9% tax credit is competitive. The state has a plan and you comply with that. And they are pegged to the state, the federal treasury, 70% present value. So that's
Yep,
what they call
okay.
9%. It's very competitive.
Yeah.
And then there's a 4% tax credit, which is, you get that if 50% or more of your development cost is financed by bonds.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's the 4%. All the deals we are doing use the 4%.
Which is a bit unusual. Generally, it's been at that 9%.
Correct.
Right, right.
But-
Okay, that's the power of.
9% is competitive, and
Yeah.
the county may get one every other year, so
Yeah.
waiting for that, that gives you a good 40 to 50% of the development cost.
Yeah.
Whereas the 4% tax credit could be 25, maybe 30.
Yeah.
But it's still significant because you don't have to pay it back.
Well, I hope, Ms. Angie, that we have signaled to you and staff to be aggressive about going after any money that's available, whether it's from the state or the feds. Just keep going. You've been doing awesome work. We appreciate all of your due diligence, your creativity. And if you need more support from us, you bring the basic facts and we go. So, thank you for the first part of this on the affordable housing bond. Really great information. As you can see, my yellow highlighter was busy at work. And we've got some more information on supportive housing now.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jess Larson for the record. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm your Supportive Housing Services Program Manager. Though I do want to say congratulations to my colleagues. It's really tremendous to see where we're at with the affordable housing bond. I know I'm known as the SHS person here, but before this, I got to work with the chair in Metro leading our affordable housing bond effort. So it's great to see where we're at after just a few 5 years of implementation. So here we are in year 1.5 of our supportive housing services program implementation. So we're at the halfway mark in year 2. So I'll be giving you some updates on our goals to date this program year, where we're at with our financials, some additional investments that are planned with carryover funds, some governance work underway in our homeless services advisory bodies and other general homeless services updates, and I'll do so rather quickly. So first, we've added 70 year-round shelter beds this year. So that brings us to a total of 170 year-round shelter beds that have been added so far because of these new regional resources. We have also stood up again a winter shelter network of 150 beds. So those are in operation as well right now, though those are temporary sites and they close because we don't have permanent locations, which is the whole purpose of our shelter infrastructure work that we're doing concurrently. In addition to shelter, some of our housing outcomes are that we've so far housed in Q2 alone 124 households into permanent supportive housing and 348 households so far this year, as well as a new program we call Rapid Rehousing. This is based on a federal program. It's also for homeless families or individuals, but it's targeted to folks who need temporary housing, financial support, and case management support. So they graduate out of that program as opposed to supportive housing, which is a permanent support, both financial and case management. So we have 82 households in that program so far to date because it's brand new, but we're on track and hoping to meet our goals. And as Director Colavar said earlier, we've housed more than 1,000 people in this program since its inception. So we're pretty excited about that. Here's where we're at with our budget so far this year. We budgeted for $50.5 million in our second program year. So far to date, we've expended 12.9. That's 26% of the budget. That's actually where we wanted to be at this point, even though it's halfway through the program year. Because we're building programs, we know we spend less in the first quarters and more as we go in the third and fourth quarter. We don't expect to expend the total budget this year. We expect we'll have another year of some carryover funding, but as you'll see in the next slides, that is actually helping support a lot of that infrastructure we're needing to do to support the long-term sustainability of these housing and shelter programs.
So you budgeted 50.5. What did we get?
Well, we're always collecting just as we're spending. And last year we collected 63.8 million or 68.3. I'm sorry, I don't remember that number precisely.
Yeah, you know.
So far we are on track, but collections have been they're quickening and evening out, if that makes sense, because they are now required quarterly.
Oh, yes. Quarterly estimated payments. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So the taxing mechanisms are still quite new, and the revenue is not yet sort of stabilized, but we are on track to collect probably more than the estimated 50 million for this program year.
Commissioner Willie, I may be remiss with the SHS Oversight Committee packets. I previously have extracted out the financial report memos and sent those to the board, and I may have missed the recent one. So I will double check.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've tried to make sure I do that. So my apologies if I was remiss.
So here are some plans in the works for our one-time investment. So we had $46 million that were carried forward from year one into year two. And here are some of the ways in which we're planning to invest those resources, probably in the second half of, possibly some of this funding will go out in the second half of the current fiscal year. Likely most of it will be starting to kind of get into the community in the next fiscal year. But certainly those reserves are really important to make sure we're well prepared for an economic downturn or significant incidents in a program like a flood in a shelter or something like that, where we need to lean on some program reserves. So the reserves will be fully funded. A capital fund, I'm going to say more on that in a second. We're also planning on an access center capital fund coming next. We're always working to acquire PSH, potentially through a hotel acquisition. And then we're also adding resources in eviction prevention. So on those really quickly, you are probably aware that we have executed a shelter capital fund, working to invest in the capital needs of a shelter network that would help us achieve those 250 year-round shelter beds that we set as a goal with this program. So some of the shelters we have in our community need capital reinvestment. We also need to help fund new shelters with our partners like in City of Hillsborough and Beaverton and elsewhere. So we received 8 applications and have reviewed them, and we are just getting notifications out now to the partners. The RFI was just completed, the review process. So we'll be coming back to you with a full report on that probably in the next month or so. We are also working on getting investments out to our community providers. We have over 20 organizations who are contracted with the county to provide supportive services in our many homeless and housing programs. And we're working to invest in their long-term organizational needs so they are able to do better invoicing and other organizational responsibilities to be strong and fit partners for us for the long term. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, we are working with Community Action to really beef up their eviction prevention funds, kind of sustaining some of the rent assistance funding that has expired with federal funds to keep that capacity in action in our community, preventing people from falling into homelessness. So that contract, I think, is being executed as we speak and will be available this next month for additional rent assistance funds to prevent evictions.
So how long is that program gonna go?
The eviction prevention fund specifically we are programming for it as part of our carryover, our additional funding. It's not necessarily planned for the long-term programmatic needs of SHS, which are really focused on permanent supportive housing and ending homelessness. But because we have these carryover resources, we have the capacity to put them out in this preventative way. We don't expect that SHS will be able to sustain this increase in funding probably longer than 2 or 3 years, depending on how long it takes us to build up the full program and keep it in operation.
Yeah, because that's $12,000 per household. So yeah, I think sustainability is the question that I get asked most about not only this program, but the affordable housing program. Once we build them, can we sustain all of the support that we provide? Same thing with SHS.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Some exciting programs that are underway. Andrew was speaking to the opening of what I'm calling now the former Aloha Inn, because we hope to be having a renaming process in partnership with our community providers and the local community and bringing a new name forward for the building soon. But what this means with the opening of the physical building is that 54 households who are currently homeless will be moving in and being able to create stable housing again with on-site case management supports. And that is a true kind of representation of permanent supportive housing in action in our community. So we're really excited about that. I understand applicants are being screened almost as we speak, and hopefully we'll be moving in next month.
So that opens up 54 spots at the LON. So is this a domino thing? Right?
No,
These are actually 54 folks who are working in our housing case management program, probably living in shelter right now and looking for housing, who will be moving in.
I was in the next step of that. Sorry, I thought you were moving them from the LON to longer term.
Not yet.
Okay.
The LON will actually be permanent housing. It was previously operated as a shelter.
That's right.
But it's been closed to finalize the.
Forgot that piece too.
And then we have our 11 interns so far going to their internships at one of those 22 organizations, learning how to be housing caseworkers or outreach workers or peer support specialists, and becoming our future workforce in housing. Because as you've probably heard, this one of the biggest challenges of launching this new program is the workforce needs of hiring all these new housing workers. So we're excited about the new housing careers pilot. Here's a lovely story you may have caught in the Hillsborough Times recently. Stephen is currently employed at Open Door, but previously experienced homelessness, and he talked about moving into shelter and how it got him out of the weather, but more importantly, it helped him figure out how to get on his way in the work he's doing now and the life he's living in our community. So we're excited. He's actually helping to operate the pod shelter program at Hillsborough. Some other quick notes for your awareness. We are also working on transforming or updating our governance structure. We have several different committees that are comprised of community advisory work, overseeing our homeless services. Some relate to HUD requirements and some relate to these regional program requirements. And we're working to bring it all under one umbrella. So we call this our one governance work. We have a transition advisory group who's working. They have members from HISN, the COC board, and HPAC collectively helping to bring all of those perspectives together and help make this transition in advisory work. And we'll be bringing this back to you for your consideration and ultimately appointment of new members of this streamlined governance structure. And we also are planning to help make sure that that aligns with the Tri-County Advisory Body work. Thank you, Chair, for your work and service there, as well as the Regional Oversight Committee. So all of this advisory work is feeding up and connected and related to one coherent system of homeless services. Speaking of one consistent homeless service system, we did our first regional count this year for the point in time count. So Washington County worked in full collaboration with Multnomah County and Clackamas County and our partners at PSU as consultants to conduct a consistent regional count. And so we're excited to get that data back and build upon this practice of understanding our regional need.
The data come back?
My understanding is it's mid-April is when we hope to have that compiled for public discussion. And then, as you're fully aware, we're working on time, place, manner policy, and we'll be continuing to work with you and bring that conversation forward. But the homeless services team, especially our outreach and shelter teams, are working closely to help build that out. And now added to the plate is also the executive orders with the governor. So lots of work underway in our homeless services system just to bring that to you for a point of awareness in this quarterly update. So I think that's the end, and we just have time for any questions or feedback from the board.
I just want to say thank you for all the work, and it's very compelling, and I'm proud that it stands up so strongly with our regional partners as well. It's clear that Washington County is a leader here, and that's my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything other than I don't fully comprehend the sustainability and the money. Maybe that's just a private conversation. I'm not opposed to anything. I think you've done a good job. I just don't understand how it keeps on working out into the future.
That's actually an excellent question, Commissioner, and I'd be happy to take that very quickly and say that what we're creating here is both a system of response to the homeless needs in our community today, but oftentimes the way homelessness is resolved is with permanent supports, permanent rent assistance and permanent case manager support. So there is a significant question after year 10, if this measure is not continued with voter support, there will be a loss of housing stability necessarily resulting from that, because many people who are moving into housing today are going to need permanent rent assistance, much like the rent assistance programs we provide in other parts of our housing authority. So we are building a system for long-term stability. And understanding if that funding does not continue beyond year 10, there will be some real decisions that need to be made.
Is your concern between now and year 10?
Not so much, because I think you kind of have that, but I'm just trying to understand. I like programs that are sustainable for many years. And I just don't fully understand. You've answered my question perfectly.
Great.
It sounds like we have a big cliff or those who sit in these seats will have a big cliff decision coming up in a few years. Yeah.
The cliff might be shorter and taller. And I think that's the other thing that's being worked on here is, addressing and bringing people through the process.
Because we're using best practices, and this is a best practice for community service.
Those wraparound services that lead to employment opportunities and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you give me just a little bit more information on the Shelter Capital Fund? I think didn't we just get an email on that
Yes.
today or yesterday?
you.
And yeah, it's the first I was actually aware of it. So could you give me a little bit more information about that?
Absolutely. I'm sorry to hear about that. So we put the request for interest out into the community, I believe at the end of November, and projects had an opportunity, had about a month to prepare a pretty brief and accessible application. Our intention was never to assess we designed the funding to be a gap resource to help make shelter possible, but not fully finance the complete build of any one project. So we knew that there were a couple shelter capital projects out there, and wanted to help support them along to their final state. So we structured the funding as based $30,000 per shelter bed that would be created, and assessed each project for its commitment to the general, a commitment to be a long-term shelter provider with the county, a commitment to provide long-term shelter, and then a basic budget and, a location so that we could make sure that we were building a coherent shelter system across the county. We didn't want to fund 10 shelters in Hillsborough. We wanted to fund, shelters throughout the whole county. So it was pretty simple, straightforward criteria. And as projects were able to meet that basic criteria, they now will move into the next phase of more specific clarity and establishing a contract to distribute the fund. And there are some milestones that each project needs to achieve before funding will be distributed to them. And this was just the initial review to make sure they met the basic criteria.
So we're gonna, as soon as this 10 million is spent, are we gonna refill it and do it again?
This will be a good and important question. I think we're looking for funding for the capital needs of our shelter system from many different funding sources. The governor's executive orders might come to play into the capital needs for shelter projects. But one important thing we want to manage for as we're planning our long-term shelter infrastructure is that we can operate that shelter infrastructure, because once the shelter is built, it needs to then have an ongoing annual budget that we will be the probably sole funder of as the county SHS funder. So we don't plan to build, that's why there is a goal for 250 shelter beds, not a goal for 1,000 shelter beds, because we won't have the resources to be able to sustain that. So there's some question about will this current tranche of applicants be able to meet that system need that we are planning for? Will we be able to operate shelters beyond that? We have some more assessment to do and then that might present an opportunity for additional shelter funding and also, additional capital funding for shelter. As long as we have those additional, as long as we have underspent revenue from the SHS program.
One more quick question.
Jerry, can I interrupt you? I need to walk away. Change of guards happening in minus 15 minutes. Great presentation. I don't see you as the SHS lady. I consider you the three gurus, Comey, Josh, and you. Thank you, all three of you. Great presentation. And sorry I had to leave.
No, I'm sorry. I should have asked you that. I knew you were close on time. So.
I was fine.
No, my last question is easy, I think, as well. Can we accumulate money each year from the money that we are not spending, but obviously anticipate spending? Can we reserve some of that and push it out past the 10-year mark in the event that potentially we don't have this funding again beyond 10 years? That would give us a longer runway. Wouldn't have the cliff. We'd have a little bit further phase out. Could we do that?
My understanding is with the intergovernmental agreement that yes, to a degree. Oh, Brad is here. He was with
Brad is
with us
queued up.
in that.
I just woke him up.
He sweat lots of bullets.
Yeah, we spent a considerable amount of time and on the IGA, and this wasn't necessarily contemplated. The anticipation was that this will continue on and on. But that being said, we've set up substantial amount of reserves in multiple places that could be used after the expiration. Because we always anticipated that there would be more money and we'd have to continue to push that money out. But that's a really good question, Commissioner.
Well, yeah, because we all know that 8 years from now, this is going to come back around on the ballot box. And there's a lot of competing stuff that's going to hit the tax rolls between now and then. So at some point in time, you're going to reach a point of no return on what the voters will accept. And I don't know, maybe they'll love this program and say, yeah, it's good, but
Well, wouldn't it be a very nice problem to have if we have been successful in eliminating the chronically homeless and just need to sustain the wraparound services, but that in addition to taking care of that, that we have been abundantly successful in so that there's been no new net homelessness and that we have funds in those later years to reduce down just the existence of that homelessness that remains.
I would agree with that comment. You're
You'll
much
just
more.
have to run for a couple more terms to get there.
It'll be 95.
Couple more terms, I'm gonna be there. Wow.
Sorry.
All right.
You just picked up really fast.
I made a comment about her earlier, so she owed me one. No,
Get
you're much more optimistic about that.
Oh,
We won't
darn.
Have this, but I would agree.
I had a cookie.
Vision. We have a vision for that, and I think that's exactly why this program, has a 10-year snapshot into this thing. There's lots of good things we can get done in that 10 years. I'm not optimistic that the problem will be non-existent at that point in time, but yeah, I would really like us to be able to establish a reserve fund. So when we get to the end of year 10, we don't have to experience the cliff. So that would be what I'd suggest.
I want to get through this legislative session without somebody yanking the program back.
Isn't
Yeah.
that the truth?
And that's,
Retroactive.
that's a risk right now.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes.
We all need to make sure we're on point about that.
But I don't want to jump ahead of anybody. You're all set? Okay. No, I try to keep up with the program, given my role as ex officio to the SHS Oversight Committee and the Tri-County Planning Body. But I gotta tell you, in addition to highlighting really useful, amazing results, there's like, good, I didn't realize, good, check, 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 great. So, and it was that way for affordable housing too. So it's just amazing work that you're doing and building these new programs, addressing the needs of our community, being accountable for all those dollars, accountable towards the results. Jackie, I hope we've been keeping you very busy and getting those contracts out the door. Yep, yep. So, really just thank you, thank you, thank you. So if I can borrow a page from Commissioner Teresa's book, thank you very,
Okay.
very much.
Could I just add one quick thing here? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
But we always end these by thanking our voters, thanking the people that made these funds available. But I think that there's that, and that's very important. But I also want to thank the leadership here for bringing to the table the right people. to do this work, because this is another long thank you from Pam. But it really is key. And I think that that's what shows Washington County as a star in this relationship. Is we've got the money, but we also have the right people at the table with the partners out at the different organizations, whether it's legal, whether it's housing, wherever it is. So I think that's something that was just dawning on me, that it's not just the money. So that's really an important piece.
Yeah,
It never is just.
No, it never is.
No, there are multiple new pilot programs here. So you keep innovating, to use that word, and I think demonstrating on the larger scale, the US scale, that these programs make a difference, not only in the lives of the people they're touching, it's building our workforce. There may be folks who start building their careers through this that will go on into other behavioral health related fields. You just never know. A little bit of opportunity can go a long way. So, as I was listening to you bring all these results to life here in the presentation, I'm thinking, man, this is the 21st century anti-poverty campaign, going back to the 60s, right? So anyway, keep it up. And I just have one other note. You may have noticed that I did one of those unusual things, and I took a phone call during our work session. It was Chair Tootie Smith. Earlier today, and I can't remember what section of our meeting it was. It might have been when we were talking with Aaron Doyle from Government Relations. There was mention of the Housing Advisory Committee.
Oh, that was during my leadership update.
Thank you. So Chair Smith was inquiring as to how we might be approaching putting forth applicants, and so it was timely. I let her know that we're following up on the recommendation from our subject matter experts, that they're great development partners, great community-based organizations to encourage to serve in that capacity. She said, so you mean in terms of instead of elected officials? I said, yep. People who do this work. And she said, great, good to know. And then she asked me what Multnomah County was doing. And I said, I don't know. I haven't had a chance to make that phone call yet today. So please just get the word out to our partners, send them the application, and let's get those applications in. And if we need to submit a letter, I bet you could probably get at least 3 thumbs up to approve a well-worded memo to that effect. Megan? That we think, based upon the affordable housing and SHS programs, that these are the right kind of folks that would serve the Governor's Housing Advisory Council well.
Does Chair Smith have enough time to listen to our meetings?
I don't think she was.
I don't think she
I
was
think she just
listening. I
called.
think she was genuinely curious.
I just because it was mentioned this morning, I was wondering if there was somebody.
They are riveting.
Yeah, they were so interesting.
So I think between the 3 counties, I will say, connecting with County Administrator Schmidt from Clackamas, and also Serena Cruz from I'm tired too.
You didn't have a
I know, I won't meet my goals then. But no, really, just as we're trying to understand the governor's declaration, everyone's trying to understand even just what this emergency management kind of the structure is going to look like within each county. And so internally for staff, we're meeting every Monday morning at 8 a.m. to make sure we're just connected of what's new. So we are on point and working with our partners just from a staff perspective too.
Oh, I think Executive Order 3 or 4 dealt with Housing Advisory Council and that they have to have an initial framework in by April and then some plan in the end of the year. I don't envy them that task. It's going to be a lot of work, but I feel comfortable that or confident that if we get the same subject matter experts that helped elected officials like me lean in both 2018 on the affordable housing bond and then for 2020, the SHS measure, and then your implementation strategies and plans, that will be well served. So thank you.
So just as far as a letter of support, if we have applicants, if I recall correctly, the deadline for applications is on February 17th, which is next Friday. So if we need a letter, since the board is not meeting next week because of NACO, we'll work it through an email kind of approval, if that's okay.
I was going a step further. Our staff has helped us with all these partnerships. And I think today that we would be comfortable with putting our names to a letter from crafted by staff that enumerates, here are examples of subject matter experts that have helped us. And we hope that you will, just a preemptive letter in a way, saying, we hope you will receive applicants from folks out of this pool. And we are in fact encouraging them to apply. But please know that we have tried to prime the pump so that you will have good folks to choose from.
Thank you for that clarification. We can work on that.
Yeah, does that sound reasonable?
Sounds great.
Yeah, because I mean, amazing results. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, keep up the good work. Great. So, any last minute leadership stuff?
No.
Your cup runneth over.
Multnomah. Multnomah.